This podcast is brought to you on Roku and Fire TV by PodNation Podcast TV. Find us on X, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever podcasts are broadcast. Download our app and never miss a show with video on demand, as well as exclusive content found only on PodNation TV. Live from Copenhagen, Denmark, it's the Monster Island Film Vault, episode 102, Reptilicus versus Damon Noyes. Hello, Kaiju Lovers, and welcome to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. I am your host, Monster Island's traveling film curator, Nate Marchand. Yeah, and Jet is still with me, but thankfully, since we've been this is one of several episodes in a row that we've done together. I think it's actually the third one. I'm starting to get a better handle on the Jet speak. So, what was that again, Jet? I told you, Jimmy and Kaguya are still on their honeymoon in the Sea of Tranquility. Okay, they're doing a lunar safari. Really? You're telling me that Jimmy has said he would have come back like the day after we left? I highly doubt it. I mean, come on, man. I mean, honeymoons usually take a while. All right, you know what? I'm not arguing with you on the air. We need to move along. We need to move along, sir. All right. So, bother me with emails later. All right. Anyway, this is kind of a big episode. I'm just saying it may not be quite as big as a ship of battle. I'll say that much. But in order to do this episode, I have to bring a man on who is living the dream that has been 4 years, I believe, in the making. And he didn't have to flex his executive producer muscles to do it today. Damon Noyes.
Well, hello, everybody. It's about time.
You've
the clock on the wall says it's past the time for me to be here.
Oh, I mean, you've only been trying to get every kaiju podcast you listen to cover what
and
we're
the
talking
ones that
about
did,
today.
The ones that actually did it usually did it before I got there, before I started listening. So, it is what it is. And yet they all fall short because we have the best luck in the world.
Yes, see, I told you, Damon. I told you. Okay, you jumped to one of the big tiers on the Patreon, which eventually earned you executive producer status, and you're like, I'm going to sponsor this movie. It's like, you don't have to. It's on the list. Just be a little patient. And I feel so vindicated right now, okay? Because Vinegar Syndrome put this movie back in print. Not only did they put this movie back in print, they put both the original version back in print and put the alternate version in print in America for the first time.
But if you'll remember, I think it was a year ago, I clued you into a seller on eBay who had the Danish print.
Yes.
I bought it. I watched it. I enjoyed it for what it was. And then I let you know.
Into it.
Yes, we will. But we did have that copy early. It was just a fluke that Vinegar Syndrome got the original prints and was able to do this
and put out a
huge
4K
event
with new special features. This thing hadn't been the last it had been released on home media was in 2015. We'll get into it. So let's not beat around the bush anymore, because Reptilicus is silly, but it really illustrates the great array of monsters all over the place, because
every country has a monster they're afraid of in their nation.
Every monster
has a country, yeah, station they call their home.
is the most apropos song that I have been playing all season for this episode, for this movie, because it was inspired by Reptilicus. Reptilicus was referenced in the song, which is what I said at the beginning. It was Reptilicus was the premiere of the revival of MST3K on Netflix. So they launched with a kaiju movie, and listening to that song in that episode when I was watching it, I was like, you know what? I think we're going to be okay.
I have a theme. I know what I want to do now. The evil percolates within my brain.
Should I be worried?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like, and I'm sure that the board also saw that episode and got their idea of, oh no, the monsters have gotten loose.
Opinions. Anyway, before I get myself canceled, yes, Jet. Yes, Jet, I don't need you to yell at me. I didn't catch everything you just said, but I know you're yelling at me, so calm the F down. All right. But, Damon.
Yes.
I mentioned at the start of the episode that, yes, we are in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark.
It's beautiful.
But we are in a very special place in Copenhagen. We were able, through much finagling, to park what is apparently, according to my friend Rex Start, the world's ugliest mecca. I'm not disagreeing. In Tivoli Gardens.
This is true. Tivoli Gardens is smack dab in the center of Copenhagen. It is downtown. A gorgeous place. Yeah, it's absolutely freaking gorgeous.
It is, fun fact, it is the third oldest amusement park in the world.
Yeah.
Opened, I should say, in 1842, if I remember correctly. Jet, tell Jimmy to put that in his blog if necessary.
I think only, what is it? There's the Queen's Garden or something in England. Maybe it's the King's Garden now. I mean, sadly.
Yeah.
But there's also the Poison Garden is also there. But I mean, only those things have that same kind of history locked behind them because they're so old. We in America, we can't compete. We just can't compete. We got national parks, but it's not something that was created to be in the center of society to let people know, look, we're awesome. We have beauty. Go look at it.
Yeah.
And give the Danes full marks. And, for my book, I can understand why the Norse hate them. The Norse never had anything good to say about the Danes. They didn't trust them. And when you put a garden in the middle of your city, I can understand why you wouldn't trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a lot of significance here. But like you mentioned a few short episodes ago when we were on to talk about Emperor Antonio, his chest hair, and his beetle god.
Beetle god.
We mentioned that you would be in Copenhagen for a very special event.
Well, let me tell you, Nathan, it used to be it's not an annual event because there's just not enough of us. It's called Repti-Con. It is a convention specifically geared for Reptilicus lovers. Now, in the past, it was only in the United States, and sadly, there were only about 300 of us, so we took up less space than like conference room B in like Illinois.
So you're talking about where G-Fest is held?
Yeah, we had one of the smaller like sub closet rooms in the basement. There wasn't enough of us, but damn it, we are dedicated fans, and Vinegar Syndrome, you have done a great service to Reptilicus lovers everywhere, because here in Tivoli Gardens, when they did Repti-Con, 3,000 people. Oh my God. It's like,
yeah. So someone had the brilliant idea of actually taking Repti-Con to where it all started in the 60s.
I believe, in my heart, I believe that the spirit of Ib Melchior, the screenwriter for Reptilicus, I believe that he influenced whoever it was who put this together. And that's the thing. The Repti-Con masterminds, the ones who put it on, we still don't know who they are.
Oh, they're as mysterious as the board, huh?
They are incredible. Well, yeah, up to a point. I mean, they don't try and lop off our heads or
plan.
Yeah, they don't plan anything nefarious, as far as we know. All we know is that they've been trying to get Reptilicus out there in the public eye as much as possible. And as we'll see, it in America, at least, it worked. Now, that's not to say that it was ever popular as a movie, but it was out there. And
and we'll get into it, but Reptilicus, I feel like, in spite of itself, accidentally became iconic.
I am going to go out on a limb and say, much like other movies like from the 50s and 60s that tried hard and failed hard, it built up that kitsch value that people were happy to see it because they saw it as a kid, probably not scared of it. I mean, it's not a frightening movie. It does have more gore than you'd think of for a 1960s movie, but it definitely hit a chord with a lot of kids, a lot of monster kids, a lot of teenagers. But it is memorable because it's so bad. And that's why I love it.
Yeah, I don't think I would call it the worst movie I've covered.
Oh, no, not by a long shot. But
I'm not even sure it's in the top 10, but I don't know. Well, maybe
it's in the top 20.
Maybe it cracked the top 10. It's not top 5.
Once we get into it, I think that it has cracked the top 10 simply because of the Vinegar Syndrome release and the wider
top 10 worst movies I've covered on the podcast.
Oh, on the podcast? No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, worst movies of all.
Kaiju
movies. We can if we're ignoring anything made by Asylum, yes. Let's say traditional kaiju movies from the I think
Jed is getting a little defensive because some people say he was in one of the worst kaiju movies.
I believe that we gave you, Jet, some satisfaction because while we riffed you a little bit, we also gave you your props.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure that watching this movie in the it's not really in the screening room because it's a little cramped here in Uber Mogra, but watching the movie in preparation, I do think gave Jed at least a little bit of a charge, for his plot convenience battery.
Plot convenience for Jet is like Reptilicus' superpower.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is.
Let's call it what it is. But the first thing we got to do, even with the new Vinegar Syndrome release, even with Repti-Con being, it's experiencing a tenfold increase in attendance, and now it's at Tivoli Garden, which is an important, location for the movie. And I'm sure you've probably heard Tivoli Nights get played at least a dozen times in the last 2 days at the convention.
I wish I could say that it has grown on me.
I'm guessing you probably prefer seeing that performed on one of the many stages, like the pantomime stage and all that here at Tivoli Gardens. You prefer that over the other song.
The song that shall not be named? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the interesting thing is, not really my friend, I've barely gotten acquainted with him, but Kevin Gomera from The Island was invited to Repti-Con, and he's been doing some performances on.
He expressed an interest to revive both Tivoli Nights, his own lounge version of it, and the Tilicus song that Dirk Passer does in the Danish version of the movie, and that stunned everybody.
Yeah, my question would be, maybe I should ask after we're done here. Maybe I should go ask Kevin this. I would like to know if he's gonna do it in the original Danish, or if he had somebody who did a really nice translation. I need to know these things.
I avoided that stage when he decided to go up, just because once was enough for me.
But
So
you are the Reptilord.
I know that. I know that.
You are
But
the
that doesn't-
self-proclaimed Reptilord.
As you will see, fans, it's a problematic part of the movie.
Yeah.
On so many levels.
Yeah, it is. Although something, and I don't remember if I've mentioned this too much on the podcast. I think I at least brought it up when I started hyping the episode. Maybe when, I don't know. It's been a hot minute, and I've slept once since then. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there are actually 2 Reptilicuses, Reptilici. I don't know what the official plural is. You'll have to tell me from the Reptilicus fan community what it is. But it's one is male, one is female.
Yes.
The female is flighted, the male is flightless.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll get into that because they're the subjects of different versions of this movie. And so as part of my glorified fetch quest, I don't care, bring it on board. My compatriots and we have to find both of them. The funny thing is that Lady Reptilicus is kind of a tease. She's always flying away, staying just out of reach of that very lovesick male that is just bound and determined to have her.
There's a point of order here. The Reptifans have semi-officially named the female Regina.
Okay.
And the male as Reginald.
Reginald, I like it. Regina, Reginald.
Yeah.
Regina and Reggie, I like it.
Yeah. And Reggie's, he's not that smart. He's just not. So
he's got a little too much Dirk Passer in him. Maybe.
A little, Dirk does disappear halfway through the movie. That I hadn't thought of that before. That is an interesting point. I'm gonna have to talk to the rest
I
of the
didn't
people
mean it literally, but
no, I'm liking it. I'm thinking that.
Are you and the rest of the Reptifans going to be petitioning for the board to officially change their names? Because on the island, they are Lady Reptilicus and Sir Reptilicus.
I think that we are going to petition the board for this. I hear you have a pretty decent lawyer, and I think he would work well in this instance. And he likes lost causes, so
yeah, lost causes. I have a feeling you will have an easier time. Well, he will have an easier time with this name change than trying to help Dr. Tatopolis get God added back to Zilla's name with Toho. But
yes. Yeah, that is definitely a lost cause there.
Yeah, I'm very good friends with Raymond, and even Raymond's not entirely sure he can pull that off. I forgot to mention during the initial broadcast that today's Toku topic will be biological regeneration. Because, well, if you've seen Reptilicus, you know that those critters can grow back from even just a severed leg. Yeah, that's a thing. And now, back to the show. But anyway, we need to get to the entertaining info dump so we can get everybody with the Vinegar Syndrome release and all that. I'm sure more people have seen the movie now, but we still got to get everybody on the same page. Yeah, Jet, I wrote it this time because you're still filling in for Jimmy. So guess what? Legal loophole. I don't have to read it. I have my executive producer here.
Yeah.
And I decided to give him an extra treat because he's wanted this episode for so long. It's like, you know what? You have it. So here you go.
I would be honored.
I'd
be so honored to read this. I've been wanting to do one of these forever.
Well, here you go.
In both versions of the movie, Reptilicus, aka Reptilicus martensius and Tilicus, is an aggressive and destructive ancient reptile with incredible regenerative abilities that seems to bridge the difference between land animal and aquatic. It regrows from a severed tail found by copper miners in Lapland and terrorizes the Danish countryside and Copenhagen itself. It can fly in the Danish version of the movie and spits acid in the American version. Its motivation is to instinctively return to its home, which is now Denmark. The gruff and bored General Mark Grayson is an American officer assigned to Denmark, which he finds to be beneath him because it is peaceful and there is no war for him to fight. When Reptilicus attacks, he relishes the opportunity to take action, but he does take the crisis seriously. Lisa Martens is the sensible older daughter of Dr. Martens. She competes with her sister for the affections of Svend, but in the Danish version she ends up with Dr. Grayson. Her younger sister, the youthful and flirtatious Karen Martens, spends most of her time, especially in the Danish version, romancing Svend, which includes much time on the beach. The women's father, Professor Otto Martens, is the intelligent and firm scientist studying Reptilicus. He splits his time between advising the Danish military on their tactics to kill Reptilicus and his daughters in the romantic endeavors, although there are more of the latter in the Danish version. UNESCO representative Connie Miller differs in each version. While she's brilliant and assertive in both, she comes across as austere in the Danish version and more pleasant in the American version, as she tries to tell the stubborn Grayson what to do and not to do when battling Reptilicus. The down-to-earth and guilt-ridden Svend Viltoft is the miner who discovers the severed tail of Reptilicus, and, because of that, is consulted by the scientist, during which he catches the eyes of the Martens' daughters. His regret at finding the creatures eventually leads to a solution to the problem. Dr. Peter Dalby is the negligent and sleep-deprived scientist who leaves the freezer door open, allowing the Reptilicus tail to thaw and regenerate, and he is later killed by the creature. The bumbling and moronic Peterson, aka Mikkelsen in the Danish version, is a janitor at the lab where the creature is being studied, and he serves as the movie's comic relief, making few contributions to the story, aside from being a scapegoat for the creature's revival and messenger for Dr. Dalby. Captain Brandt of the Danish military, assigned to General Grayson as his second-in-command, is a heroic and dutiful officer who sacrifices himself as a distraction so the sedative can be fired into the monster's mouth. The human and kaiju plotline intermix differs between each version. In the American version, the plotlines are mostly unified, with all of the characters focusing on Reptilicus in some way, whether for study or fighting it. Subplots are barely existent. However, in the Danish version, the romantic subplot involving Svend, Lise, and Karen progresses independently for much of the movie, but being interrupted by the kaiju crisis has little effect on it. Reptilicus is the problem in both versions. The Danish military engages Reptilicus with tanks, artillery, and machine guns, which are ineffective, before attacking the beast with flamethrowers, which force it to retreat into the ocean. The Danish Navy bombards Reptilicus with depth charges, which succeeds in wounding the creature, severing a leg, but not killing it. Reptilicus returns to land after regenerating, and the military has several more engagements with it, once again attacking it with tanks, artillery, and machine guns. In the American version, Reptilicus counters all of them by spitting acidic venom. The problem is solved once the military and scientists cooperate. Svend bemoans his fate and wishes that he could take a sedative, which prompts Connie to formulate a plan to load a tranquilizer into a rocket that can be fired from a bazooka into Reptilicus' mouth. During a final engagement, Captain Brandt drives a jeep near the monster to distract it, becoming crushed and sacrificing himself. And Grayson seizes the opportunity to fire the rocket into the monster's mouth, knocking it out. However, the movie ends with a shot of the severed foot beginning to regenerate at the bottom of the ocean. Both versions used a script written by Ib Melchior and director Sid Pink, but the American version is a simple science fiction thriller with some horror elements. The Danish version is slightly more complex thanks to the romantic subplot. Both have a large cast of characters, although some are more pertinent to the plot than others. Both versions, especially the Danish movie, are arguably lavish productions for that era of the genre, at least in the West. The full force of the Danish film industry is applied to the movie, and it was given a budget of $133,000, or 950,000 Danish kroner. Although some sources give it as a $233,000 budget, the extra $100,000 for the American reshoots. The movie shines with its location filmmaking, showcasing much of Copenhagen and, to a lesser extent, the Danish countryside. What's even more remarkable is the military footage is newly filmed for this movie and not stock footage. The gore effects and life-size tail props are quite impressive. It's the miniatures built by Kaj Koed and puppets built by Orla Høyer that truly hurt the movie. Harryhausen and Tsuburaya, they are not. The filmmaker's ignorance and inexperience with the genre is transparently obvious, because these sequences look like nothing more than a puppet awkwardly flopping around on a set. Even so, the added optical effects for the acid slime look decent despite being shoehorned into every shot. The tones of both versions are inconsistent for several reasons, but the American version is a relatively light thriller with a moderate amount of gravity, while the Danish version is a tonally inconsistent comedy that still tries to have some gravitas. With its copious scientific explanations for the outrageous monster, both versions are fantastical science fiction movies. Both versions veered away from the two common origins for monsters in movies at the time, atomic mutation and outer space, and explicitly featured a regenerating kaiju for the very first time. Couple that with a story about a kaiju unleashed by accident and not human hubris, and you have a film that breaks the mold for its time in several ways. These, by extension, make Reptilicus an expansion of style, as films like War of the Gargantuas would copy elements from the regeneration, and GMK and Godzilla Minus One would copy the ending. The Danish version, thanks to its tone and infamous musical number, is an expansion of the kaiju genre as a whole, because it beat Mothra to theaters. Also, being the first kaiju movie produced in Denmark makes it experimental on its own right. Producer, co-writer, director Sid Pink wanted to take advantage of his connections in Denmark and showcase the country by tapping into the popularity of monster movies at the time. AIP, American International Productions, on the other hand, wanted to create another movie that would appeal to the drive-in movie crowd. To that end, the American version was made to entertain that audience as well as kaiju fans, and, in Pink's mind, children. The Danish version was released February 20th, 1961, with the American version released in a handful of markets in November of 1962, grossing $800,000 against the combined budget of $233,000 for both versions. Whether this gross is for both or just the American version wasn't specified. Both versions were panned by critics in their native countries, but they've garnered a cult following as a so-bad-it's-good movie. Danish audiences still laugh at it to this day. Some, though, consider them two of the worst examples of the genre. To put it succinctly, the Danish version is 94 minutes long versus the 81-minute American version. While they largely follow the same plot, the American version has overall more dynamic and dramatic cinematography and a much less comedic tone. Some of the less impressive special effects sequences, including the notorious flying scenes, were cut for the US version, giving it a tighter pacing. Actress Bodil Miller was replaced with Marlise Bergen as Connie for the American version. The Danish version includes the Tilicus song, sung by the actor who portrays Peterson, aka Mikkelsen, while the US version has a travelogue of Copenhagen. A romantic subplot for Svend and Karen is in the Danish version and absent from the US version. Acidic slime was added via optical effects in the American version, and a more detailed discussion of the differences will be discussed in Toku Talk segment. Several forces are at play in both versions. Sibling rivalry is seen between Lise and Karen as they compete over men, although this is more prevalent in the Danish version. It could even be argued that Lise, as the older sister, is feeling the pressure of a ticking biological clock. Arguably, peace and purpose clash with Grayson, a soldier who relishes the Reptilicus crisis because he needs a war to fight. In the Danish version, Grayson finds himself pulled between both halves of his heritage as an American with Danish ancestry. Military might clashes with science as Grayson refuses to listen to Professor Martens' counsel not to attack Reptilicus. He is a man set in his ways, unable and unwilling to learn new ways of addressing problems, which Professor Martens calls him out on. Despite the often haphazard script, there are a few themes. It is negligence and bad luck, not hubris, that leads to the revival of Reptilicus. Even so, it is a mess that still requires swift action to clean up. Svend briefly wrestles with guilt over finding Reptilicus, but he's quickly assured that it isn't his fault. Professor Martens puts his ego aside when it's suggested by a journalist to name the creature after himself. In the Danish version, despite competing over the same man's affections, Lisa and Karen still love each other as sisters. Most importantly, Grayson learns to be open to new ideas to solve the kaiju problem, and the military learns not to disregard science as a source of solutions. All right, Kaiju lovers, it's time to start the discussion that's been 4 years in the making. Cue the music.
Okay. This is a little bit unique.
Very, 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 very.
Yeah. We are covering both versions of the movie today. Both of us have watched both versions. I saw the Danish version for the first time in preparation for this. The only, I think, fair comparison that I have heard for how this panned out for Reptilicus is the 1931 Dracula,
Yeah.
which
Most
had the iconic Bela Lugosi version that was in English. And at the same time, the Spanish language version was filmed using the same sets, the same script, but a new cast and crew and in a different language. Now, there are some minor but interesting differences between those two versions of the movie, but they're basically the same movie. Reptilicus is not exactly like that, but it's like that. I don't know. I have a hard time. Because some argue that these are two different movies. I tend to feel, after watching both of them, with how similar they are. In fact, sometimes even the shot composition is exactly the same. And especially since it has the same actors, just in a different language, that I think I land in the camp of saying that these are two versions of the same thing. Especially since they were basically filmed back to back.
And see, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say that they are two separate movies for the simple fact that they have two separate budgets. Obviously, it's fairly negligible when you actually come down to it, but also the fact that they replaced an actor.
One actor.
That's why I said just one actor. They replaced an actor. They have two separate directors and two different cinematography sensibilities to them because of that.
I understand what you're saying there, but at the same time, I think some of that is because of Ib Melchior and not Sid Pink.
And I also you can't leave out producer Sam Arkoff either, because he's the one who asked for all the changes.
He asked for it, but Ib Melchior did it.
He had to. I mean, otherwise he was going to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's so complicated. The basic gist of what we're dealing with here, because it wasn't fully explained in the entertaining info dump.
No.
What you were looking at here is you had these two separate versions of the movie being filmed back to back. Ib Melchior was the screenwriter. He was Danish American, which is interesting. You know, so it's interesting that he works on both versions. So he's kind of because he's basically the bridge between the two of them. He wanted to direct it, but Sid Pink basically said, nope, I'm doing it. And he got it.
Yeah. You have to give Sid Pink his props for being a poor man's Roger Corman. So he's the one who sold the movie.
How can you be poorer than Roger Corman?
Pink found a way.
I'm noticing a pattern with all of your appearances this season.
Let's just say that he is a used car salesman as far as a producer. He was able to, and director actually, he was able to go to the Danish government and just basically sell this as the greatest thing for Denmark. One, he did love Denmark. He loved Copenhagen. He loved everything about it, which is why in the American version, there's kind of a travelogue. But
the whole rest of the movie just stops and it becomes a travelogue.
Yeah, for about 6 minutes or so. But that being said, he sold them a bill of goods that he literally could not fulfill. And what can you say? That he had the force of personality to be able to walk all over Ib Melchior. And that's just the way it was. I think Melchior gets the last laugh ultimately because his filmography of stuff that he's written and directed aren't there better movies. Just throw this out there.
Sid Pink was known for doing basically B movies, sci-fi B movies. What he did before this was actually one of his claims to fame, which was a movie called The Angry Red Planet, which he worked on with Ib Melchior. They got him a lot of attention, got AIP's attention, which was the important thing.
Right.
I think he made that for AIP, but AIP was very happy with how that turned out. And,
it's considered a classic. So yes.
Yeah, it's considered a classic. After this movie, because it was something, the whole experience for everybody making this. After this, he was known for making some spaghetti westerns in Spain. So it's really more Euro westerns. And, for the rest of the 60s. And then in the 70s, he ran his own little theater chain and basically retired till he died in the early 2000s.
You talking about Pink or Melchior?
Pink.
Oh, Pink. Really? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my other notes. Never mind. Yes, and Melchior. Well, hey, if you're gonna wax about Pink, I gotta wax about Mr. Melchior, because, oh my goodness, as this guy, they missed out doing a biopic about this guy. Born in 1917, went to the University of Copenhagen. He joined an English Players, a British theatrical company, where he was an actor in the beginning, and then went on to stage managing and directing. Just before the outbreak of World War II, he came to the United States with a troupe to perform on Broadway. So not bad going in. He volunteered to U.S. Armed Forces right after December 7th, the Day of Infamy.
Oh.
Patriotism, man. And he wasn't even born in America. But they put him into Cloak and Dagger OSS and the U.S. military intelligence. Dude was a spy. So not something you put stupid people in. The guy, and with his theater background, he could blend in. So he is what Indiana Jones says of Denholm Elliott's museum curator. He does. He could have gone. We don't know his service record. He's like Christopher Lee. We don't know Christopher Lee's service record because he was a spy too. Mm-hmm. He was decorated by the U.S. military and the King of Denmark. So both countries gave him medals.
Oh, careful with your mic there.
I saw that. Yes. Well, it is just kind of hanging down from the ceiling.
Yeah, I know. But the mobile studio's not the fanciest.
No. Post-war, he directed over 500 television shows, individual episodes, ranging from the musical Perry Como Show to dramatic documentary The March of Medicine. In the late 1950s, he wrote low-budget science fiction films, previously named The Angry Red Planet, Journey to the Seventh Planet, which was also a Danish production.
Yeah, that
starring the same main actor.
Yeah, what Pink did is, since he loved Denmark and he had connections to Denmark, and like I said, Melchior is, it was a Danish American, so that's why he was interested in this. He basically said, hey, we should make movies in Denmark. So they cut a deal to make 4 movies. The 2 versions of Reptilicus were 2 of them.
Yep.
And the other ones were the Green-Eyed Elephant?
Green-Eyed Elephant, Green-Eyed Elephant.
It's a body swap comedy.
Yeah, Green-Eyed Elephant and the Giraffe, I think is what it's the full name. It's just not good.
And the other one was Journey to the Seventh Planet, which is about going to Uranus.
Yes. Yes. It's better than Reptilicus. I'll give it that.
I haven't seen either one of those. I didn't even know they existed until I was researching for this.
Other movies he did was The Time Travelers, Planet of the Vampires, and one of my kitschy favorites, Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
That one I have heard about. That's on my streaming queue to get to.
You should watch it. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting idea. The title alone has kind of sold me on it. Yeah. I've got it right here, my note on that. So, the Green-Eyed Elephant, 1960, body swap comedy about 2 aspiring actresses who switch bodies with each other. And I think because they did that, they end up getting successful, which is kind of funny. And it was based on a novel from 1931 called Turnabout by Thorne Smith, and then Journey to the Seventh Planet, 1962. Which I heard, I read would be described as basically a surreal science fiction film similar to Solaris.
Kind of. It just didn't have the, how do I put this? Introspection, I guess. It wasn't quite there yet, but it had the germ of that idea. Yeah. Again, not horrible, but better. The writing is obviously better than this one.
Well, I mean, if you look at what Pink did afterward with these spaghetti westerns, some of them were just really strange. Like one of them was called The Bang Bang Kid. And you're like, what? Because he uses 2 guns? No, it's about a guy in the Wild West who makes a robot.
Okay, I need to see this movie.
And it's called The Bang Bang Kid.
I need to see this movie. Can't be.
Okay, I need to. What?
It can't be any worse than Billy the Kid versus Dracula's daughter.
Yeah, well,
It can't.
he also made one. I forget what the title of it was, but it sounded like it was basically all female Magnificent Seven.
I actually don't see anything wrong with that. That could work.
I was
very
just,
well.
I'm just like, well, I see what you're doing there, Pink. That's kind of the gimmick. Mid '60s. That's kind of the
Yeah.
gimmick.
It needed to be
cowgirls doing stuff. I get.
He was taking a little page out of Russ Meyer's book.
Yeah,
and it just didn't quite land that.
Yeah. What else did you have? I have a few notes I'm going to mention about Pink's biography here.
Ib also in 1976, he was awarded the Golden Scroll for best writing by the Academy of Science Fiction. And that's not an easy thing to necessarily get. So give him that. And finally, as most fans should know, and I know you know this, he wrote the original story for The Volcano Monsters,
which was going to be the original hyper Americanized version of Godzilla Raids Again. Go back and listen to my episode about it. Shameless self-promotion and all that fun stuff. I don't recall the episode number offhand, but Godzilla Raids Again with Michael Hamilton. We did talk a bit about Volcano Monsters. It would have been a really wild adaptation that Toho made suits for it, but it fell through and they ended up just doing a weirdly edited dubbed version of the existing movie. But the thing that's really strange that I found out, a lot of the ideas that Ib Melchior had for that got recycled in Reptilicus.
Yep.
But one of the more interesting details, and I don't remember coming across this before, I knew that Anguirus and Godzilla were going to be basically rechristened, and then Ankylosaurus. Yeah, that makes sense. And a T-Rex. A little bit of a stretch. But the T-Rex would have been female.
Well, there's something you don't see every day.
Because the whole thing would have hinged on, the T-Rex is trying to lay eggs. That's a problem. It became the whole spawning regeneration thing in Reptilicus.
Yeah.
Considering all the discourse that I've been hearing about, with people arguing that Godzilla is females, like, oh man, if Volcano Monsters got made, they would have, oh boy.
Yeah, they would not have, I don't think that would have landed well either.
It's just, I can just imagine them being like, but about the Volcano Monsters, and then all the other nerds are like, that's not Godzilla.
That's not my Godzilla.
That's not my Godzilla. Whatever, I'm not here to get into that, but yes, he almost got to write Godzilla. He kind of sort of did, but not really. But he has other kaiju connections.
Yeah, just a little bit. But he died in 2015 at the age of 97. And in fact, one of the articles that was written about Reptilicus, the person who was doing it actually got to interview him and mine his brain. And apparently he was lucid up until the end and remembered everything about Reptilicus and gave him the real story about what went on behind the scenes.
Which is wild because Sid Pink died in 2002. Most of the cast is gone. I did find out that the younger Connie, she's still around. Marliese Barron, she's still around, but the Danish Connie is not with us anymore.
Bodie Miller.
Yeah. Is it Bodie or Bodil?
It depends. It really, depends on who you. We listen to the commentary, so even the commentary.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's Mr. Melchior. Sid Pink is noteworthy for several things. I've mentioned a couple of them already, but he's actually considered to be the father of 3D movies.
Yeah.
And that was because of a 1952 movie he made called Buona Devil.
Oh, God.
Which it was not like a science fiction thing. It sounds like it was an adventure movie set in Africa, from what I've been able to gather. And he was, and like I said, he was known for making spaghetti westerns, low budget sci-fi. And his other claim to fame is he helped Dustin Hoffman transition from stage to screen.
I see.
Yep. So, interestingly, early in his career, he was actually, ironically, this just cracked me up when I read this, he was the budget manager for
Wow.
Lost Horizon in 1937,
Oh,
which,
wow.
to make it even more ironic, that was the most expensive movie ever produced at the time, with a budget of $1.25 million in
Oh,
1937.
Oh, good Lord. How?
And he was in charge of managing that money.
Oh my God. How much
That
of it
was
did he
probably
cost?
the most. I bet he spent the rest of his life thinking that was the most money I ever got to play with in a movie.
Oh, because he certainly didn't have that for Reptilicus.
Even with inflation.
No, not even close. Oh dear goodness.
So yeah. So let that sit. And then infamously, he turned down producing A Fistful of Dollars in 1964.
Oh, that's a classic blunder.
What? Yeah.
Like waging a land war in Asia.
Yeah. And getting into a contest with the Sicilia when death is on the line.
And it follows that we're both geeks. Yeah.
Oh, calm down, Jet. All right. All right. We are not having a battle of wits right now. All right. All right. Plus, you can't even drink iocane powder. All right. Jeez. I never thought on this Reptilicus episode I'd be making
Princess Bride references.
Yeah. And then, like I said, he produced over 50 films. And in the 70s, he owned his own theater chains in Bainbridge, Georgia, Puerto Rico, and Florida.
Wow.
Got out of the business at that point. But he did say in 2001 he wanted to remake Reptilicus. And you know what? But then unfortunately he died in 2002 and didn't get to realize it. But you know what? I'm going to go on record saying I don't normally care for remakes. I think Reptilicus would benefit from it.
You're not going to get a disagreement from anybody here at Repti-Con.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, Reptilicus, we'll get into the movie itself here in a moment, but Reptilicus is one of those movies that has a lot of really interesting ideas that were kind of, as was expounded upon a bit when you read the entertaining info dump, were kind of revolutionary at the time for the kaiju genre. It was just horribly implemented and kind of suffered the same fate as the giant claw. Except, yeah, I think Crazy Bernie's fared better.
It's debatable.
Yeah, but we'll get into it.
Yeah.
We will get into it. So, and it should be noted, Sid Pink was the co-screenwriter with Ib Melchior. He was the producer, and he directed the American version. The Danish version was directed by a gentleman named, I'm assuming it's Paul.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. Yeah, we got, like I said, some of these microphones.
There's like four of them hanging from the ceiling. So
yeah, I'm sorry. You might have picked the worst one. I'm sorry, but the Danish version was directed by a gentleman named, I don't know if it's Powell or Paul.
I think it is Paul Bang.
Paul Bang, because I looked at it as like Paul Bang. What?
Yeah.
Paul Bang.
Yeah,
anyway, and he directed the Danish version, and their approaches are very different. But where things start getting complicated is Sid Pink said in several of the sources that I looked at that there was actually a third version that he claims as his. He does. So I guess he doesn't feel like the AIP version that was released is necessarily his. He thinks of it more as Melchior's because he delivered a movie to AIP. AIP, according to him, said, "Oh, this is great, thanks." And then behind his back, they mucked around with it and had Ib Melchior do things like re-edit the movie a little bit, dub over all the actors, which is hilarious, and put in some new special effects.
New special effects.
New special effects.
Quotation marks around new.
Yeah, which we'll get it. Which it just cracks me up because they bothered to make two versions of the movie, one in Danish, one in English. But then AIP didn't like the sing-songy Danish accents. So I said, this is not going to fly in America. And this is, I see even back in the 60s, I swear, movie studio executives, even people like AIP who are, specializing in B-grade movies. Like there's a whole special feature on the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray where they talk about the kind of stuff that AIP did. They were catering to the drive-in movie market. The guy joked about how people tend to think of drive-in movie theaters as teenage passion pits.
Oh God.
That was his phraseology. But he actually said that when they started and they were at their peak in the 40s and 50s, they were aimed more at blue collar families. Because if they couldn't afford a babysitter, which was very common, especially right after the war, they could just put the kids in their pajamas, put them in the car, go see a movie, and the kids would fall asleep in the car and mom and dad can watch a movie.
Gonna let you in a little secret. That is 100% true because they were still doing that in the 70s when I was a kid.
Yeah. So you had that, but apparently movie studios looked down their nose at drive-in movie theaters. They called them ozoners because they were open air. They had nothing but ozone above them. They thought that those were lowbrow venues and they didn't want their movies to go there. So you have a combination of blue-collar families, teenagers, and movie studios who don't want to send their movies there because they think it's beneath them. So you had studios like AIP that specifically made movies that would go play at drive-in movie theaters. And one of the perks of that was you could be a little more relaxed on the Hays Code.
Enter Russ Meyer.
Yeah, basically. So it's a very interesting combination of factors that I didn't fully know until I started watching the special features on this Vinegar Syndrome set. I was like, this is really interesting. And that's where Sid Pink comes in doing work for AIP with Angry Red Planet and all that. And that was his mindset going into making Reptilicus. He's making it for that audience, that crowd. In his mind, interestingly, Reptilicus is a movie for kids. The studio thought they were going to get a more serious science fiction film because he's like, oh, science fiction fans, they're smart. You got to respect them, which is why they wanted to do away with the sing-songy Danish accents and all of this sort of stuff. And, it's hilarious. It's like all these very conflicting ideas because the Danish version is clearly aimed at a very different sort of audience. And I don't just mean native Danes.
No, it is definitely, Paul Bang was primarily a comedy specific director. And that is no more evident than with the inclusion of Dirk Passer, who plays Mikkelsen in the Danish version, Peterson, same guy, but just different. The
comparison that I heard on the commentary for this on the Vinegar Syndrome set was that this is basically like making a monster movie starring Red Skelton or John Belushi. Like it's that like whoever's the most popular comedian of his time, you put him in a monster movie. That's what this guy was.
It's exactly what it was because had been in 2 previous movies by Paul Bang.
Green-Eyed Elephant was one of them.
Yeah, and then the Vergekroen, I think is how it's pronounced, in 1956. And so he was obviously friends, and they got along well, and Bang knew what to expect out of him. And that was it.
Yeah. So they go to the trouble making these 2 versions because they're like, hey, we're gonna, since we're making a big deal. Pink was doing his used car salesman bit. It's like, oh, this is going to be a big deal. We were making the movie here. You know what? We'll have you guys make your own version just for your market, which actually sounds like a nice thing to do. And then we'll use the same people, most of the same people, and we'll make an English language version because that's what we're here primarily to do. And then the studio it still decides to dub over them. So it's like, it truly is a kaiju movie because it's getting dubbed, even though it's already in English. I can only think of a couple of other times where somebody decided we have to just dub over this when it's already English. And I'm specifically thinking of the original Mad Max. They did that because the accent, but in that case, it's because the accents were so thick, even though these people are speaking English in a country where English is the official language. Nobody outside of Australia could understand it. So
technically they did that for either the 3-headed monster or Monster X or whatever it is, because they had to, even though they filmed the original movie in Japanese with, Jimmy's spirit animal, saying his lines in English. Yes, Mr. Adams, Nick Adams. Thank you. But in the dubbed version, he had to redo his own lines.
Yes.
So there you go. I mean, that's not the whole cast, but they're doing it.
Yeah. And then, so which means there's a whole second cast for this movie. So when you're watching this, people, even in English, that's not what the actors actually sound like.
No, not even close.
And there's a couple of notable names. I'm looking at them right now because thank you. Shout out to Neil Reeby. He loaned me the long out of print and nigh impossible to find book, Reptilicus, the screenplay. And it includes the dubbing credits for this movie. I think this is the only place where I've seen them.
I'm so jealous.
And all the things I've looked at for this movie, that's the only place I've seen them. And there's a couple of notable names in here. You have Professor Martins being dubbed by Bob Cornthwaite, who was in The Thing from Another World in 1951. That's one of his notable credits. And then the other one is both of the daughters were dubbed by Janet Waldo, who famously played, among other roles, Judy Jetson.
I thought that sounded familiar.
Yeah. And then Ib Melchior himself dubbed about, I'm looking at it, dubbed about, at least in these credits, dubbed about 5 people. Most of them are bit roles. But he did Hastings and Olsen, and he did a PA voice, a soldier, and a captain.
Way to go, Ib.
Yeah. And, there's a bunch of other people who were in here. Lee Miller, I think there's supposed to be he dubbed Sven. I think that's supposed to be somebody who's kind of noteworthy. I forget I read so much stuff on this movie. Yeah.
It all kind of blends together.
Yeah. J. Edward McKinley was Grayson. I think he was noteworthy as well.
Yeah.
And Tony Karas, I know was somebody who was noteworthy, but like a lot of it is stuff that's way before my time and I don't remember. So, it's just wild that they go to the trouble and then they still just dub the movie. They would have almost been better off just taking the Danish version and just looping it. But
yeah, they probably should have. But
maybe
best laid plans of mice and men. It was still under budget. Budget.
Yeah. So there's all this weirdness going on. So Sid delivers the movie. All these new changes get made without really him knowing, and because of that, he sued AIP. Because the movie came out in like early to mid 1961, the Danish version in Denmark. This one got postponed because of lawsuits until late 1962 in America.
And even then, it was only in 3 markets.
Yeah.
That was November of 1962, Nebraska, Texas, and Ohio. Because apparently movies like this do well in the sticks.
Yeah, in flyover country.
Yeah, it's weird.
It eventually found its way to other places. They're not sure if it ever played in New York. If it did, it was on a double bill.
Yeah,
instead.
It
did not play by itself. So
its wide release was in January of 1963, where it played in 21 theaters in Los Angeles alone.
Yeah,
and that's where it saw the big explosion.
Yeah. So it's like, but here's the thing. Sid Pink was just suing everybody. He was suing AIP for mucking around with the movie, and having Ib Melchior get to actually kind of sort of direct it when he did. So it's like, my version doesn't exist anymore. So this one is. I guess he didn't really feel like it was his. He's also suing Monarch Books over the novelization.
And that's a whole other ball of wax. I will be interjecting every now and then with selected. I don't want to say excerpts because I can't read those on this podcast.
It's not
what should have happened.
We'll talk about that, but basically the gist of it, as we'll be talking about it, is what is it? Dean Owen. That was the pen name, the
pseudonym. Yeah, one of the many pseudonyms.
One of the many pseudonyms. He injected a bunch of smut into this novelization, and that angered Sid Pink because in his mind, this was a movie meant for kids. And he said, and you turned it into a sex story. So he sued Monarch Books. He's just suing everybody over this movie.
Now, while we're on that subject, let's just get to the irony of this, because Dean Owen also penned the novelization of the British Conga. which also it's already kind of
It's already, yeah.
it's already kind of icky
It's
as
already
far
kinda
as
icky, yeah.
the sex things going on in there. So, but he just expanded upon that. Of course he did. And he also apparently did under a different name, the Gorgo,
which inexplicably also got modified, which makes sense. He had to work hard to make that work.
He worked so hard, he actually added a female character where there is no female character in Gorgo, just so he could write
just to do that.
And both the production team of Gorgo and the production team of Konga said, okay. They didn't care. They didn't care. They didn't sue. They didn't put up a fuss. It's a different medium. We don't care.
Yeah, can you imagine? And these are all in 1961 to boot, too. So can you imagine, like, this guy's like, oh, I did another sexy kaiju adaptation, and none of that sex is in the movie. And then it's like, oh, the other guys didn't care. And then Sid Pink is like slapping down a lawsuit on him. I was like, what the heck are you doing?
To give you a rundown, I want to give you a rundown of this man's pseudonym list. Now, his real name, his legal name, was Dudley Dean McGuffey. He wrote over 100 Westerns. So the guy was mostly a Western writer. But here are some of his pseudonyms other than Dean Owen. Dudley Dean, Owen Dean, Lincoln Drew, Lynn Evans, Owen Hodge, Owen Lynn, Dean McCoy. I like that one. Brett Sanders. And Brett Sanders has, that just screams Westerns, doesn't it?
It does.
And Brian Wynn. This guy had more pseudonyms than anybody I've ever met.
Brian Wynn.
Brian Wynn. W-Y-N-N.
Oh, it still sounds kind of puntastic because he sounds like the kind of guy who's like, guess what? I always win.
Oh, you're funny.
But you know what? This reminds me. We're talking about all these lawsuits. I know a lawyer. I bet he had something to do with it. You know what, Jet? I downloaded my phone contacts into the computer. Call Raymond. I have to know. I need to talk to this man about these lawsuits. All right. So, Jet, dial him up.
Legal Action Team, Raymond Martin speaking.
Hey, Raymond, it's Nate. How's it going?
Mr. Marchand, happy to hear from you. Where are you at?
Oh, I'm actually in Copenhagen right now with my friend Damon. We're actually on the air because I have some questions about a movie that we're covering that is definitely up your alley. I wanted to ask you.
Well, shoot. From the hip, if you can.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. That's a good singer there, Raymond. I like that one. So we're talking about Reptilicus.
Which version?
Well, specifically the American version, but
yes.
Yeah, but we were talking about how Sid Pink is suing everybody over this movie. He was suing AIP for making changes without consulting him, and suing Monarch Books for the steamy novelization.
Yes, he certainly was. What a rat.
Oh, so were you involved in these?
Yes, I was working for Monarch Books, and I was also working for AIP at the time.
Really? You represented them against Mr. Pink.
Have you ever met Mr. Pink?
No, I have not. He died when I was a much younger lad.
Sad to say, I had the mispleasure of meeting Mr. Pink in person.
Oh,
unpleasant individual. Felt like a used car salesman.
Yeah, that's Damon mentioned something about that too.
Did he now?
Yes.
Copyright infringement. I'll sue him.
Oh, geez. Come on. Raymond, calm down, okay?
Fine.
Where's Gary? Did you give Gary the night off or something? Because usually he reels you in a little bit on this.
No, I'm working back here. I'm basically holding down the fort while he listens to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Gary. Anyway, so okay, all right. So you represented Monarch, Monarch Books, not Monarch, the monster organization, and
there's still time.
Yeah, and AIP. So I'm assuming, at least with AIP, that it sounds like they kind of won because the movie did get released, and he couldn't stop the changes, Mr. Pink.
Of course not, because when you make a movie, despite the fact that you are the director and possibly even the primary producer, the
movie house itself owns the property and are allowed to do with it what they will. They have final cut unless it has been negotiated first, which it wasn't because Mr. Pink did not think that far ahead.
Ah, that is unfortunate. So that's how you won that case. Well, I guess Monarch won too, because it's not like they stopped publishing the book. I mean, it's way out of print now, but that's because it's a 60-year-old book.
I believe in that case, if I'm remembering correctly, faulty memory though I have, that because it is a different medium, the novelization does not have to stick the landing, as it were. It doesn't have to be a line for line or scene for scene adaptation. The author has carte blanche to add things that might enrich the story.
And I guess he was afforded a little too much of a leash.
I believe that the author of that particular adaptation had a penchant, as it were, for sexy times.
Yes.
Spiciness.
Yes.
Lewd conduct.
Uh-huh.
Mostly because he wrote westerns, and westerns tend to have houses of ill repute, as it were.
Uh-huh.
Which is, of course, a standard of the novels of the time. Now, this is not to say that I support what this author did to this franchise. You can call it a franchise. It's 2 movies, right?
I mean,
there was also a comic book adaptation.
Comic book.
Yeah.
Which Damon and I will get into with that one. Thankfully, Sid Pink didn't sue Charlton, which is a little astonishing. But they did lose the rights to using the Reptilicus name, and then they had to rebrand. Was that a suggestion you gave Charlton? Did you suggest the name Reptosaurus, or did you tell them that, like, oh no, you can keep going, just change the name?
It might have been an oblique suggestion during the deposition. But nothing overt, nothing on record.
So we have you to blame for the 2009 pseudo remake.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Raymond, don't make me bring you on for another. It's not the Asylum, but it's close enough.
I believe it is Sub-Asylum.
Sub-Asylum. Yeah, that's another good one there. Yeah. Okay.
Can I have Raymond back? We really got a lot going on over here.
Yeah, yes, Gary. Yes, Gary. You can have him back. Just keep holding the fort down for us back over in Monster Island. I promise, once I've wrangled all of these kaiju, we'll be back, and if Jimmy shows up soon,
we'll do our best, Mr. Marchand.
Yeah.
It's awfully quiet here without you. Can't say I like it.
Yeah, well, it's a little astonishing. Yeah, things were weirdly quiet when I was back for the wedding. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks, Raymond. See you later.
Arrivederci.
Well, there you have it. Straight from the horse's mouth, I guess.
Yeah, he's really got his fingers in a lot of pots, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm still not sure exactly how old he is, or if he's not cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah, he seems to know an awful lot, though. I mean, like too much. Yeah, it's scary.
Too much. Poor Gary. Anyway, but yeah, so there was that. And then, as I mentioned, there was the Charlton comic book. Ran for 8 issues. Charlton famously was most famously had Captain Marvel, aka Shazam. They went out of business, I believe, in the 70s, and then their library was picked up by DC Comics. So that's how Shazam ended up at DC Comics. And then that's also how DC acquired characters like The Question, most famously.
Blue Beetle, I think.
Beetle is the original Blue Beetle.
The original Blue Beetle.
Yeah,
yes.
Ted Cord, I think was his name.
No, that was the second Blue Beetle.
Second Blue Beetle. Okay. Yeah. And which is why Watchmen's kind of funny, because they're supposed to be the Charlton characters. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole we're not going down. But so they were known for doing film tie-ins and adaptations and things like that. Interestingly, they did comics for the other 2 1961 European kaiju movies. They did comics for Konga and for Gorgo. I can say I was sent by a generous friend of mine who stumbled across it at a con. He sent me one of the Gorgo issues, and it's a noteworthy one because it's one of the 4 or 5 issues that was illustrated by Steve Ditko. So it's kind of a big deal.
Nice.
Yeah. But anyway, what's weird about the Reptilicus comic, as I mentioned, talking to Raymond, is unlike the other ones, Charlton lost the rights to the name after 2 issues. Issue 1, you read the whole thing. I have not read any of it.
Yes.
You've read the whole thing. Issue 1 is an abridged adaptation of the movie. Issue 2 is basically the sequel that it never got, because the foot at the end regenerates into another Reptilicus, and then suddenly they're like, "Oh, we lost the name, so we're gonna tweak the design of the monster, and we're gonna change its name to Reptosaurus the Terrible." I don't know why
sounds legit.
I don't know why we need to add the terrible in there, but okay.
I think it was because of the psoriasis that it got, because it went from green to orangey red, and it just looks like irritated skin. That's all.
Yeah, there you go.
And it lost a couple of legs.
Yes. So it gets redesigned, renamed, and then it ran for 6 more issues, and then like a special, I think is what's called. It basically sounds like what most comic book fans would call an annual. So it got like the year after it was done. And then that was it. It's been reprinted a few places. Weirdly enough, apparently they can't always print all 8 together. They have to parse them out, probably because of rights issues. It's weird. But you have read the whole thing. You have told me it is terrible.
It is not good. Reptilicus is like the gold standard if compared to this comic book, and that's saying a lot.
yeah
because
we don't need to get into it with the comic, but it's something that exists, that it tried to extend the life of this movie, and and then it's got the weird legal issues. And then I'm sorry, Damon, we're gonna have to do like a little bonus episode for Patreon, and I'll release that part onto the podcast feed. We have a pseudo remake of sorts of Reptilicus. Said Pink didn't get to do it, but Sci-Fi Channel in 2009 made a creature feature that they decided to slap the name Reptosaurus onto and say it was based on the comic, which means, like a cousin thrice removed, it's a remake of Reptilicus, arguably. I watched the first 5 minutes of it because it's on Tubi. You can't get physical copies of it unless you go to Japan or some other country, I think.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, because I looked for it, can't get it, but it's on Tubi. So, yeah, I watched the first 5 minutes, and I'm like, you know what? That's unless I'm going to do this for the podcast or get paid for it, I think I'm done. That's enough. That's enough. That'll do, Repti. That'll do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should try. It's something. And I can't find any information about the movie at all. Like the most write-up I've seen for it is my friend John LeMay in one of his movie milestones book. Really? Magazines. He has an issue where it's all dedicated to Reptilicus, Conga, and Gorgo, and he does have a 1-page write-up on the Reptosaurus movie. Nice. And even he said in there, it's like, yeah, and I still can't find anything on it.
And was it Sci-Fi or was it Sci-Fi?
It just said Sci-Fi. It was 2009, so I don't know when they rebranded.
Because that you do see a weird quality shift around that same time period. So
yeah. So there you go. So there's that.
Yay.
Is there anything else about the production history of this film that we should films, movies? Well, we should bring up
yes.
there is one we mentioned one actor got recast.
Yes, so, let's talk about the actor.
Yeah, of course. Well, and here's the thing. The two of them who were in this movie were still not the first choices.
No, of course not.
There was another actress who was in The Green-Eyed Elephant with Mr. Passer. I think, what was it? Nora Hayden? I think it's something like that.
I'd have to look.
I'm
Yeah,
going to confirm live.
Oh,
with the
no!
book, because there's a picture of her in that movie with Mr. Passer, and so I'm going to confirm. Let's see.
Nora Hayden. It is Nora Hayden. Yep,
Was it
Nora Hayden?
Nora Hayden. Nora
Nora
Hayden,
Hayden.
not to be confused with my friend Nick Hayden. I wonder if they're related. but she was originally cast. It did. I don't know. I don't remember exactly why, but she ended up not being in the movie. And it is very, if you watch the two versions back to back, which is what I did, it is glaringly obvious that, like, everybody else, you can recognize they're wearing the same costumes. They're playing the same characters, essentially doing the same performances. Although now in the Danish version, you can actually hear what they sound like, unlike in the American version where they got dubbed over. But then Connie, our UNESCO representative, shows up, and your options are blonde bombshell and your mom.
That still gets me.
Because I looked it up. Because you have Bodie. Is it Bodie?
I think it's Bodie. Yeah,
Bodie Hamilton. No, not Hamilton.
No, Miller.
Bodie Miller, and Marlies Barons. Barons. The only reason she did that, Miss Miller did not get carried over. It's not because they're like, oh, we need to have somebody younger and prettier or whatever for the American version. No, yes, it was far simpler and more practical than that. She didn't know English. She was the one cast member who wasn't bilingual. That was the only reason. So I looked it up. There was an 11-year age gap between the two of them. Miss Barons was the younger of the two of them, because it was 1928 for Miss Miller, 1939 for Barons. Barons was German. She spoke English. Not only that, she wasn't just a German actress. No, she was Miss Germany. Thank you. So she was a beauty queen. And so they bring her in here, which means she was barely even old enough to drink by American standards when they made this movie. 1939.
Oof.
And Miss Miller was in her early 30s.
And looked it. I mean, she looked like a mature
I'm sorry. She looked like a 45-year-old soccer mom. I know that's
I said a mature woman.
When I found out she was in her early 30s, I'm like, boomers age differently.
Yes, they did. What? Actually, technically, she's not a boomer. She's
not a boomer. She's greatest generation, silent generation. Yeah, I understand. I get it. But I just like, people back then aged differently. I just swear, because I thought she was in her 40s. But she had so much mom energy. Like, she is so austere. Like, you see her in her, and she just, she has, all she has to do, I know you have criticisms of her performance, but there are points where, like, all she has to do is just, she's got the mom glare down. Like, she just looks at people, and you're just like, and it's funny because is it Grayson? No, it's not Grayson. It's the Dr. Martins. When he's talking about, it's like, oh, we're not used to having such young, pretty people here.
And I'm like, 70s.
And I'm like, and it's like, that makes sense if you watch the US version, because Miss Barons is a very beautiful woman. When you find out she was a beauty queen, it's like, no wonder.
Well, also, she's a blonde bombshell in the Marilyn Monroe, mold. Whereas, unfortunately, Ms. Miller looked like a schoolmarm from the 1890s.
Didn't you call her Mom Tilicus?
I call her Mom Tilicus, yeah. I'm not proud of it, but she did very well. She's a scientist from UNESCO.
I mean, to be honest, she's probably a better fit for what the character is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Not to criticize Miss Barron, she does fine in the role. It's not like, I don't think I brought it up on this show, but I've gone on record elsewhere talking about the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies and how I thought the actual Fantastic Four themselves were very well cast, but I've criticized Jessica Alba for being the weakest out of all of them, because clearly they cast her because she was hot and popular, not necessarily for her acting ability, let alone playing Susan Storm. And I get it. Susan Storm is supposed to be a beautiful scientist. That's how she is in the comics. It's an archetype. It's a thing. It's fine. Jessica Alba was not the best, I think, idea there. So again, I'm not criticizing Miss Behrens for being put into that role where Connie becomes the beautiful scientist archetype. Miss Behrens is not Miss Behrens. Miss Miller is probably closer to what this character would actually be. An older woman, a more sterner personality,
more concerned in the science than anything else. Just stop complimenting me. Let's get to the science.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that she's also another one of the major differences of the movie, because we've got, romantic subplots that try to happen in the American version but actually happen in the Danish version. But in the American version, Mr. Grayson ends up with Miss Behrens' Connie.
Oh yeah.
But that doesn't happen for Miss Miller's Connie in the Danish version. No, he ends up with the older daughter, which is a little weird because they look mismatched in age. I would have thought Connie would make more sense.
The thought was apparently, because they had the Danish version put him with the elder daughter of Dr. Martens, that they should, in the American version, because there's two single women, they have to pair them up somehow. And so that they were going to then shift General Grayson over to Connie from UNESCO in the American version to kind of even things out. And this is 1960s, so the sexism is just blatant, and it's icky. It's very icky.
I'm just looking at it, it's like, you clearly did that because you got the younger, prettier actress.
And that too. It is, that's pretty much what happened.
Although in both versions, poor Sven, who just gets kind of dragged into this just because he was one of the miners who, drills into the tail, and he just gets dragged along on everything. At one point, he's got both sisters going after him, and Dr. Martens and Dr. Dolby make jokes about it in both versions of it. But it's like in the Danish version, like, oh, to be 25 again, whereas it's actually kind of risque. Like tastefully risque in the American version, where they say like, oh, he's going to be busy. I'm like, Dr. Martens, those are your daughters. What in the actual Christian hell?
Here's the asterisk. Here is where the novel goes off the rails. Not only is there a love triangle between the daughters, younger Karen and Lisa, the older, there's a whole bit in the beginning with one of the head of the expedition's super young hot wife who had an affair with Sven when he was in Copenhagen away from the dig site. And then she shows up at the dig site and wants to rekindle, and he is horrified because now he knows that she's married. And it's like, oh no, I don't want anything to do with this. It's ridiculous because it's not motivated in the movie at all. So, but with regards to the daughters, young Karen picks up Sven from the airport to bring to the aquarium where the exhibit is. And before they even get there, she seduces him. It does one of those fade to black kind of things, but it's not even trying to be discreet about what actually happens. And she did that specifically to get back at her sister, the elder sister, because the elder sister had expressed an interest, hoping that this geologist was going to be attractive. Because she was coming out of a bad relationship.
Which actually does get mentioned in the Danish version.
Barely. But apparently that guy was German. Yeah.
Yeah.
German.
Well, but and the funny thing about it is that the American version is remarkably smut free. The Danish version does have a little bit, not like it has a little bit of sexiness in it, which is weird because we have a beach movie that happens a couple of times in the movie with Karen and Sven hanging out on the beach, and she's wearing a bikini, and I'm like, why? It turned into a beach movie. Like, beach movies were a thing in the 60s, and it's like, it's a beach movie now. And there are some beach scenes in the American version. There is also even an exclusive bikini girl, as my friend Luke Giaconetti would say, exclusive to the American version, but it's an extra.
Yeah.
It's like the movie just it just smash cuts to the beach, and I'm like, oh, hello, bikini girl. She's just like, bam, there. I'm like, hi. And then Reptilicus pulls a Jaws and comes ashore.
and in one of the worst blue screens ever. So,
but anyway, so they cut to scenes like that, and then there's also an exclusive scene in the Danish version where Lisa is standing in front of a mirror and nothing but a bra, trying to size up a new dress that she got because she's hoping that it impresses the guys. And I'm like,
yeah.
Huh? So it's like this whole other romantic subplot that is completely excised.
Well, I know exactly where that's from. It's not meant to necessarily be sexy, because the Danes, all Scandinavians and all Europeans actually at the time, and still, have a different view about the human body than us puritanical Americans do. So for them, it wasn't necessarily sexy. It was just natural. This is the way that people are. And, really, if you're trying to size up a dress, you don't want to be wearing, I get it.
Right.
Part of me gets it. But for those of us who have grown up with not seeing that kind of stuff regularly, it's different.
Yeah. But like I said, it all got cut, and then Mr. Owen just decided, just crank it to like.
He said,
maybe not
you
11,
want sexy times.
Maybe not 11, but at least like an 8 or a 9. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. The things that the general does to poor Connie when they go to Tivoli Nights. No, I don't. I think that's way like 15.
15. Yeah, because you told me that he uses I hate this trope so much. It is 99% of the time there's no justification for it.
Nope.
The whole, we're probably gonna die, so let's bang, and then they do it in a closet.
Well, okay. I believe you misunderstood. She says that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, Connie is the one who says that.
That's what I mean. No. Like, it's her coming. It's like, we're probably gonna die, so let's bang.
Yeah, and that was like right
in
before
a closet, which sounds like.
Well, that was actually
he said. Sounds remarkably unromantic to me. It's like, this is what teenagers do. They go to parties and make out in closets. All right, come on.
It was what the general had a cot set up in what was basically a closet. He said, at the place at the barracks or wherever where his main headquarters was, because he didn't have his own place. So he set up a cot in this little area, and she makes a suggestion, and he says, Connie, would you come with me? I want to make some notes and pick your brain about something. It's like, oh no. And then it smash cuts to the next day. So she will always remember that special night in the closet. It's like, oh no. No. Mr. Owens, why would you put that in my brain?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, where are the rest of my notes?
You're losing it a little bit there.
What was that?
You're losing it.
It took 4 sit downs to read this book, and it's only 143 pages because of the ickiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, another production history thing. This was filmed using a technique called cinemagic, but no one really explained what cinemagic was, but it's a thing.
Yeah, I didn't, if it was cinescope, I would understand. If it was smell-o-vision or sensorama,
Yeah, this is also touted as Denmark's first science fiction or fantasy film, which I think might be a little dubious. Some also say, it's their only monster movie, which is also dubious because there were monsters in some of these other Sid Pink productions, and there were monster movies from Denmark later.
Well, it is Denmark up until this time had no tradition of genre movies. The venerable King Kong of 1933 wasn't even released in Denmark until 1959. Mm-hmm. Virtually none of England's Hammer horror movies were imported. which was unusual since they were spread far and wide, like, influenza. And even Star Trek, the original Star Trek, was not shown on Danish TV until the 1990s when The Next Generation was already out.
Yeah.
So it's apparently Danish people do not respond to genre movies, specifically science fiction and horror. They prefer comedies and they prefer like historical dramas.
Mm.
Still to this day, they're kind of like that. I think the other most recent horror movie was a kind of a vampire type flick in the 1990s, like 1998, I think is what it was.
Yeah. And then something else that should be noted about the production history is that poster might be more iconic than the movie itself.
Love that poster.
That poster oversells this movie so hard. Not as hard as like an SRS cover, because good Lord, SRS's covers really oversell their movies. Trust me, I know. But I have a lot of them. But the poster is iconic. It was designed by a gentleman named Ronald Brown. And some of the design elements are lies. He gives Reptilicus arms, which it doesn't have. It's more like T-Rex arms. It's like, I have a big head and little arms. I think
even less than T-Rex arms. It's just feet stuck on the body.
Yeah, and it also has Reptilicus attacking the Golden Gate Bridge. There is a bridge in the movie, and technically Reptilicus attacks it, but it's not the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a bridge in Langbro in Copenhagen, which they did film on, and they did a crazy stunt on it. Like, that was all real. Think about that. When you're watching that scene and you have this bridge, and it's actually a really interesting set piece.
Yeah.
Which is the Reptilicus is attacking, you have a crowd fleeing, and this bridge operator, because that used to be a thing. Like, some people, there was a guy, there used to be people whose whole job was you hit a button to split a bridge if you need to let a ship through, and you monitor everything.
Yep.
Well, this guy panics, hits the button when he doesn't need to, and he's freaking out. So the bridge is splitting while the crowd is still fleeing. And then, a couple dozen of those people who are trying to run or they're riding bicycles, they all start, some of them fly, don't make the jump when the bridge is split and they fall in the water. And then other people come up behind them and shove them over the edge. Those weren't professional stunt people.
They were given a few extra bucks.
Sid Pink recruited an athletic club, a local athletic club, and said, hey, I'll buy you a gym equipment if you do this stunt for me for my movie. And they did it. No one knows if he followed through and gave them their equipment, though.
I would like to think that he had enough integrity.
I like to think so as well.
It's also Sid Pink. So
yeah.
The used car salesman.
Yes. So, like I said, the poster is kind of a lie, but the poster is freaking epic. Like I'm telling you, this is why I'm saying remake this movie and make it the poster. Make it that poster. And how cool would that be? You're not sold? You're like the biggest fan of this movie I know.
I know. That just because I'm a fan doesn't mean I don't understand the inherent lack. But how many movies of the 50s and 60s oversold what the movie actually was?
That is, I get it.
It's a trope.
Yeah. And then, yes, AIP was hoping that Reptilicus would be appealing because it has a travelogue appeal, which there is some travelogue elements in the Danish version, but obviously not nearly as much because the native audience can be like, yeah, this is where I live. So it's not as impressive. Whereas foreign audiences, American audiences, like the movie basically just shuts down and it's just Connie and Grayson going on a date in Copenhagen. And it's like a tourism film. Like people joke that the Lord of the Rings movies are just, it's just a 12-hour epic saying, come visit New Zealand. For about 10 minutes, this is just come visit beautiful Copenhagen, home of Reptilicus.
See the Little Mermaid in the Copenhagen harbor.
Yeah.
Come to Tivoli Gardens.
Come to Tivoli Gardens. And
my God. Yeah.
It just turns so it just turns into like a travelogue. And also because they could get international stars. They wouldn't be huge, but they're international stars, and that'll be appealing. Also, this was a lavish movie to a certain extent because even at this point, color film is still expensive, and this is a very vibrant color.
Oh yeah. Yes, very.
So, take it for for what it, for what you will. And it should be noted. Well, no, we can talk about, because that's after the movie, about how this thing kept popping up at the weirdest places, like sitcoms. But after we talk about the movie itself, I think we can get into that.
The movie itself.
And we'll debate at least a little bit about whether or not, about which one is better. It's not as clear cut as you might think.
No, it definitely is not.
Yeah. But, and I should also mention that, some people have criticized the actress who plays Karen. No, not Karen. Yeah, because Karen's the younger daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. What was that actress's name? I'm going to look that up here really quick. The Mr. Barbano on the commentary he likes this movie, but he's also not necessarily all that nice to it.
No. Well, once again, he understands the limitations that the movie, had to work with. And sometimes that's acting. Karen is Mimi Heinrich.
Yeah. And he described her as being 25 when she's supposed to be 20 and acts like she's 12.
Yes. The acting like she's 12 is most definite.
Yeah. They visually communicate that she is the younger daughter because she's dressing and like her dresses are more youthful and a little fancier, and they give her shorter. They give her pigtails, which just looks weird on a grown woman.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, she was also in Journey to the Seventh Planet. So
yes.
And apparently she only made 4 movies. No, she made more than that.
Also,
apparently,
I was going to say, we were talking about Bodie Miller and how she got replaced. She's still in the American version. There's one scene that both versions share, and I'm like, there she is. I was like I was the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. I'm like, there she is. She's still in it.
It is kind of a blink and you miss her though, because the camera pans pretty quickly past her. But it's during the press conference, and she's just kind of sitting there at the corner of Dr. Martin's desk, and zip. And my thought is that they can explain that away by being that's her secretary, because she doesn't have any lines.
Secretary, you don't hear her.
She has big mom secretary energy, so
big mom secretary. Yeah, and also according to my friend John, the opening scene might have been inspired by an unmade 1958 script called The Micromen, which actually sounds like a really interesting concept. And I think I've seen Star Trek tackle something like this. It would have been about intelligent spores in a meteor.
Huh. That also sounds a lot like the space amoeba from Toho.
Yeah, a little bit, but a little bit like it's sentient microscopic life forms, which is actually kind of interesting. Also, some people think that Pink may have been a backseat director with Bong.
You know what? I'm going to give that one and say that that's probably true, just because Bong didn't have any kind of history of genre filming. I mean, none at all. You can tell in the cinematography also that, some of his stuff is just wide shot and just let stuff happen.
Yeah.
Whereas Pink's version is he does close-ups. He does more camera tricks, not great, but more camera tricks to make it more interesting.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And there were comments made about there being a German version, but it never came to be, as far as anyone knows.
Would be Frankenstein eine Reptilicus.
Fighting
German
Kong.
penchant for putting Frankenstein in
and
everything.
Kong. Yeah.
And Kong. Kong is a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Eine Reptilicus.
Oh. Yeah, and then some of the other so-called, other monster movies from Denmark. Apparently there was a short called King Kong 86, something called The Great Pink, funny enough.
He is a monster.
Yeah. That's more like a trivia thing that I could probably, save for the end there. But let's just scroll through my notes to get all of this stuff so we can just start diving more into the movie itself than we already have been. Yeah. Pink said the AIP said Pink's version was virtually unreleasable. Yeah, and we'll talk about this, the acid venom, because good lord, they added that without Pink knowing, and it's
Yep.
very clear that every shot it's in was shoehorned because it makes no sense. But here's the drawback, unfortunately, because that's the thing. That's one of the other major differences. This is why there are two Reptilici. In the Danish version, Reptilicus infamously can fly.
Yeah.
And that was the big reason why other people wanted to see it. It was like, because Reptilicus flies, because even in the American version, you can see the dinky wings. And you're like, why can't it fly?
It can't.
It can't in the American version. It can in the Danish version. That all got cut out because they didn't like the flying scenes. I understand. But then they compensated for it, and they even changed lines of dialogue in the dub to account for this. They give Reptilicus the ability to spit acid, snot, phlegm, venom.
It's acid reflux. That's all.
Yeah, it can spit it at people, but they didn't bother to do some gruesome scene with people melting or something like that, getting reduced to skeletons, like in Godzilla vs. Hedorah or anything like that.
That would have broke the $100,000 budget that Pink had to work with.
Probably. It's just, they just do quick cuts to get around it, and just imply people get killed by this. And it's obvious that they threw it in there. It's not in the script. That's why it's not in the novelization.
Nope.
Because they just threw that. But here's the drawback to that. I realized when I was watching the Danish version, I found myself, shoehorned though it was, I found myself missing the acid snot because suddenly Reptilicus is less immediately threatening.
Yeah, he's just big and clumsy, and that's pretty much it.
And nigh indestructible.
I mean, when your monster is basically a marionette, much like the giant claw, at least the giant claw was in the air most of the time, and so it made sense for what it was doing. Reptilicus seemed to be much like one of Ghidorah's heads from the 1960s. He just did not have control over that damn thing. And he would use the monstrous power of his size and strength to beat against the cardboard. I'm being generous with cardboard cutouts of buildings with all the power of a limp hose. Not even dust came down from these buildings when he would strike them. It's like, okay, and that building is destroyed because they're shooting at it.
Yeah, and to make this even weirder, and we'll get in, I'm sure we'll get more into the special effects here in a moment, but just to make this even crazier, this might be some of that used carsman salesmanship coming out of here, because I found a quotation from Mr. Pink, and I'm like, sir, you're either lying or on drugs. I'm not sure which one it is. I found this on Wikipedia. This was, according to the article, was said by Pink when he went back to Hollywood. It says he praised Denmark and Danish filmmaking, including the miniatures it's a Danish miniature, so the miniatures in this movie, saying that, quote, are you ready for this? I don't know if you came across this. You ready for this? Here you go. Here you go. Danish miniature work has surpassed that of Japan, up to generally acknowledged to be the finest in the world.
This was a man who was selling a product as hard as he could. I'm not even
done. Facilities in Denmark, by Hollywood standards, are notably lacking. This is so weird. So he's saying it's better than Japan, finest in the world, but not as good as Hollywood. Okay, but fine craftsmen who put everything together by hand are not concerned with the time it takes and are excellent. End quote.
Can I get a rolled up newspaper and hit Sid Pink over the nose with that? Because bad Pink for lying so blatantly.
Yeah, he also claims that Saga Studios in Copenhagen made this movie for $380,000.
No, they did not. Oh, that's no. Every resource.
And by the way, if that was true in 2023, that would have been just shy of $4 million.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's a good independent budget, but this was a national thing, and no. because every resource I have says that the Danish version took $133,000 at the time, and that when Pink then took over his production, he got 100,000. So 233 for both movies. So.
Yeah. And by the way, critics in both America and Denmark were not kind to this movie, as you know.
No.
One critic I found, Mr. Matt Brunson from Creative Loafing. What a title for a publication. He went to town on this thing, tore it to shreds, and then punctuated his review by saying, quote, "If ever a movie was made that deserved to be showcased on the cult series Mystery Science Theater 3000, it's this one." Joke's on you. Joel read that review. It was on there. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah. But anyway, we should actually get into the movie itself. We've talked about a lot of stuff about it already,
and there's still more. That's the scary part.
Yeah,
there's
that's the scary part. But we need to. I do want to get right into it. I don't know if we should go about it like with the entertaining info dump, where we just kind of go through and compare the movies, side by side, which we've kind of been doing already, or if we want to go through each version. I think we just may as well, because they're so similar. We may as well just kind of talk about them in comparison to each other. I think
I have seen the original, I can't say that. I have seen the Sid Pink version dozens of times.
Because here's the thing. When I first went into watching the Danish version, I was wondering to myself, is this like a Godzilla versus King of the Monsters 56 situation where it's like, two separate versions, but the original Japanese version is the definitive version. Because I'm like, the Danish version was released first. So I guess that might, by default, even though it was only ever shown in Denmark, that might make it the definitive version. No, because they were filmed at the same time. So again, the 1931 Dracula comparison's more apt. But people debate over which version of that is better. Obviously, the English language version is infinitely more iconic because of Bela Lugosi. And that's the biggest advantage that one has, is Bela Lugosi's performance is beyond iconic in that one. And the guy who played Dracula in the Spanish version is fine, but he's not Bela Lugosi. No.
Well, let me give you, this might help. I learned this through one of the special features by Stephen Bissett, who is an author and illustrator. He did the special feature called Invincible Indestructible, which is directly from the American poster. We've already said when it first released in November of 62 in three venues, and then the wide release was in January of 63 in 21 theaters just in Los Angeles alone. The last theatrical showing of Reptilicus was in a drive-in in Columbia, South Carolina in 1978. It had been in constant play in some theaters in the United States until 1978.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. Although I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but I have read that supposedly Rocky Horror Picture Show has been playing in at least one movie theater in America since it released in 1975.
Yeah. And that is true, but that is also arguably a better movie. I mean, it has Tim Curry, so that makes it automatically better. Now, the first television appearance, or the first television showing of Reptilicus, was in Beckley, West Virginia on Saturday, September 11th, 1965 on Chiller Theater.
Yeah, there you go, Michael. Reptilicus went to West Virginia first.
Yep. And AIP hustled this movie onto wider television stations all throughout the 60s and 70s. So it was ubiquitous. It was everywhere.
Yeah, it basically became accidentally iconic. And then there's some other high profile appearances that it made that I'll talk about after we're done talking about the movie. Because it, like I mentioned before, it showed up in weird places like sitcoms. Yeah. So it became basically, like I said, an accidental icon. So I would say the argument can be made that the US version is the definitive one because it's the more widely seen.
Only in America, though. I think in Denmark.
Denmark, obviously, the Danish version is more common.
Yes, specifically because it's trotted out as a comedy to be laughed at and with. It is, the Danish people believe firmly that this is a comedy movie, mostly because of Dirk Passer, still considered the greatest Danish comedian ever. to walk the earth. Okay, I'll give him that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that except for Denmark, yes, the American version would be considered the definitive.
Because
It
it's like
kinda-
I said, it's
ki-
just more
yeah.
seen. It's much more widely seen.
Yeah.
And even the Vinegar Syndrome, they give the American version the star treatment in there.
Yeah, they
It's
do.
the one that's on the, if you buy the 4K, it's on the 4K disc and on the Blu-ray disc. That's the one that gets the commentary.
Mhm.
All the special features are using footage from the American version. And then you get an entire disc that is just the Danish version with subtitles, but
Yep.
that's all that's on that disc. And they don't,
Yeah.
they talk about the Danish version, but they don't put any features or anything on it. It's not like when Criterion released Godzilla and they actually bothered to have a commentary for King of the Monsters 56. You know,
Right.
they put it on there as kind of a glorified special feature. Ironically, the opposite happened in Europe. I found out in 2015, the Danish version got released on Blu-ray and they slapped the American version on as a special feature.
Nice. See, and that's what I'm saying. Is for Americans, it is the American version because it's such the widest possible audience for it.
Yeah.
And people who got like before Vinegar Syndrome put out their version of it, the Danish version was getting out there for the past year or so. And fans who had seen it said, wait, where's the spit?
Yeah,
Where's the neon green
I became
spit?
aware of the Danish version because of Kaiju Cast, because Kyle Yount had to do a follow-up episode. He had already covered Reptilicus, and then one of his friends said, there's a Danish version. And he's like, what? And then I guess this guy made it possible for Kyle to watch the Danish version. And they did a follow-up episode where they talked about the Danish version. So that's how I found out about it. So I was aware of it, but I didn't think it would ever be possible to see it. And obviously now it is widely available thanks to Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and we are eternally grateful though. Because
yes,
I
am glad that it has been made. I am glad that it has been made available. But the American version, from what I read, the edition that I had until Vinegar Syndrome for the Film Vault was the MGM Midnight Movies version. That was just easier to come by. Everything was out of print. Infamously, I came across what I found out was actually an unofficial version that had an ugly watermark slapped on it, and I'm like, screw this. No.
Yeah.
No. I will not tolerate this. But it looked like it was some sort of a new edition too. And then the one I wanted to get was Shout Factory put it out in 2015 on a Blu-ray double feature with a movie called Tentacles, which is about a giant octopus from the late 70s. I'm like, well, that's a weird pairing. That went out. Here's the stupid thing. That went out of print. It cost a kidney to get, but you could buy Tentacles by itself on Blu-ray from Shout Factory for a fraction of the cost. And I'm like, really? Is it just because of Reptilicus?
Yes. Yes, it is. Because
really,
we need to talk to Raymond again about that, because apparently the AIP is just iron fisted with the print.
Yeah, well, MGM owns the movie now.
Or MGM, I guess. Oh God, even worse.
Yeah, MGM owns. Oh, what is it? Do they own Corgo too? And Conga? They own it, at least two. I'm trying to remember what it is, but anyway, Jimmy, put it in your blog when you get around to it. I don't know if we need to pull an Elijah and just go through the movie, but
there are highlights that I want to point out.
Yeah, the title sequence alone is incredibly different. Yeah. I much prefer the American version in that regard. Some would say it's more sensationalistic, but it's also how Ib Melchior scripted it. So the Danish version diverges. In the Danish version, you get the title in not plain, but okay white text over a pastoral scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then the regular credits play. Whereas in the American version, you get some of the scenery, but we don't get the title until we get a close-up of Sven's bloody hands after he's like, what? After he's like drilling. It's like, oh my gosh, there's blood on my hands. And then the title pops off of the bloody gloves and it's in red text that looks kind of like blood. And it's like, blah.
And it's animated because it's dripping.
It's drippy. And it's
slowly
like,
dripping.
Wow, it was very sensationalistic.
In the Danish beginning, It does Saga Studios, and it's a Viking longship, which is ironic because the Vikings, who were Norse, hated traditionally the Danes.
Yeah.
So it's like, do they know that the Danes have still stolen their ship from them?
I don't know.
Good.
Also, the Saga films, they hated this movie. Like, to them, it was a massive fiasco. So they wouldn't even refer to it by name. They would just call they would just refer to it by its production number because they hated it. It's like this.
It was film 45, and that's the only way that they were allowed to talk about it.
They seed with it so much.
The other interesting thing about the beginning of the Danish production is that there was a notice that the film was made possible due to the generous support of Denmark's Navy, Army, and National Guard.
Which I actually appreciated that they did that.
Right in the beginning, before any name is up, they said, we would like to thank, because they made this movie happen.
Yeah.
Without that stuff, we would have had to use archival footage, which probably wouldn't have been all that great.
Yeah, which is one of the, as you read in the entertaining info, that's one of the ironic things about it. There's some great production value with the locations where they filmed. The most impressive thing being that they got the military to cooperate, so they didn't have to use archival footage, which is what most monster movies were doing at the time. In Japan, they would cheat by doing special effects with a lot of it. Sometimes they would get cooperation from the SDF if you were Toho, while you're doing some of the stuff, but that kind of fizzled out after the 50s. But here they're like, yeah, we want to actually film you guys doing stuff and then put it in the movie.
The irony is that the Danish government tried to backpedal on that and say that those were just training exercises that they filmed because they happened to be there. And that is blatantly not true, because the actors themselves, Ottensen, who is General Grayson, is clearly with these guys. He is in that tank. He is using that flamethrower. He is part of the Danish military.
Yeah, the Danish flamethrowers. There's the giant monster messages. That was like a running gag for them. It's like American flamethrowers. Yeah,
technically, General Grayson is an American.
He's American, but in the Danish version, he says like, "Oh, my mother was Danish." They try to downplay some of the American stuff with Grayson in the Danish version, which I'm not surprised because you're like, "This is a Danish movie," Oh, nationalism or whatever. I know, patriotism, I guess in this case, not really nationalism, but
So there was the interesting thing about the fact that they're mining for copper in Lapland rather than like oil or uranium.
So that was one of my observations that I said to you while we were watching this, that I found weirdly fascinating, because not only the guys on the commentary, Barbano and Newman, point out that this movie diverges from what was common at the time, because the easy origins for monsters in the monster movies of the era was aliens or nuclear mutants. Again, I'm sorry about the microphones.
It's okay.
It's right. Anyway,
it's all over
Jimmy, we need now, not Jimmy. You know what? Board, you need to give me a bigger budget so I can have better microphones in the mobile studio. Anyway, so is that Reptilicus? Isn't that?
No.
It's not a nuclear mutant. It's not from outer space. It's a prehistoric creature that was revived. And here's the other part. And this was my big observation to you. There's no human hubris in this. There's arguably
none at all.
There's arguably some stupidity. But everything that happens with Reptilicus being revived happens by accident and by understandable ignorance. They don't know what they're dealing with. And
that's
Dr.
amazing.
Dolby just gets tired one night because he didn't drink enough coffee and leaves the door open, so the tail thaws a little bit and starts to regenerate.
And immediately in the morning when they find out about this, they try and blame Peterson. They try and blame the handyman. And Dr. Dolby, bless him, Godzilla bless his heart, immediately jumps in and says, it's not Mickelson's fault. I did this.
Yeah. So, but it was an understandable mistake. It wasn't like a case of where like you have a greedy business guy who's like, oh, I'm going to exploit this to make money. Or you have misguided scientists who are like, we're going to study this and we're going to learn crazy things. We will figure out how to regrow human limbs using Reptilicus or I'm going to make this into my own personal deadly pet, or like all these mad scientist things. No, they're just like, oh, new animal. Let's study it. Not knowing fully what it is. So basically, the movie is about them fixing an accident.
Yeah. And the accident being, okay, you accidentally thawed out this permafrosted thing. Now it's going to deteriorate. We're not going to find out the information that we want as well as possible. But then his daughter, Dr. Martin's daughter, finds out, says, that wound from the drill looks different.
Yeah, Karen.
Karen says the wound is different. And
by
they
the
look
way,
at it,
I love,
clean.
Interestingly, Karen doesn't freak out at any of this.
No. She's remarkably passé about everything.
It's like, are you just used to seeing Dad work with stuff like this all the time?
Apparently. Well, you know, she was born, if she's 20, she was born in 41.
No. Well, no, I'm thinking, it's not now wrong. It's Lisa. She's the one who's older. Say, like, I don't know about the younger daughter. I think freaked out a tiny bit,
but yeah, Lisa's, I think she saw the war. She was old enough that the war affected her. So yeah, maybe seeing a giant bloody tail regenerating on the, that's okay. I'm good.
Yeah. So, but anyway, and the opening is also, I think, even though this isn't true throughout the whole movie, the opening is almost a case study for how different the movies are stylistically.
100%.
Because the American version has close-ups, it's edited faster, it's a little more sensationalistic, a little more dramatic, a little arguably a little more shocking. You were pointing out that when you watched it again with the commentary, that in the American version, you notice like the stuff that they put in the wheelbarrow actually twitches a little bit.
It starts pulsing. It's obviously liver that they're using to represent Reptilicus flesh that is strangely fresh after being permafrosted for literally 70 million years.
Yeah, that was time period. It's a little remarkable. It's a
little more accurate than they usually are with these things. There's this little part of it that just starts pulsating. And obviously they have a little jet of air underneath it, giving it life. Good foreshadowing that I had never noticed before in the dozens of times I've seen this movie.
But in the Danish version, everything's a wide shot. Even the blood, when Sven is like, "Oh, there's blood on my hands," like it's just a static camera, wide shot, and I'm like, and part of it's because I've seen the American version before this, but part of me is also like, I am by no means a filmmaker. But my instinct would have been, if you're going to have a character point out that he has blood on his hands, you want to zoom in and show it.
Yeah. But in both, I mean, Sven does this really stupid thing. His hand is covered in red liquid, fresh, and he puts it right up to his face and smells it.
Yeah, which that's just what? It's just weird.
It's like, well, the only thing I can think of is maybe he thinks it's oil. Like a weird colored oil, or it's a discharge.
Well, and that's the other thing that's different. It's not like with the miners when they find this. It's not like they were looking for things like oil or something, which could have been, the start of a thing where you could make criticisms about about big business or energy or something like that. No, they're looking for copper. Copper is about it's not even like a precious metal. It's not like gold or diamonds. No, it's copper. It's one of the most practical metals you're ever going to come across.
And that's why they want to find it, because it's good for wires. And they were wiring the Scandinavian countries for electricity, because not all of the Scandinavian countries had access to electricity, with half of them being rural and frozen. Yeah. So copper,
it's similar to some issues that I talked about in the Troll Hunter episode with Norway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that they didn't, that is in the Danish version, which is not in the American version, there's a character, another miner or engineer, whatever, named Henrik. Now, he's kind of a character. He's only in the first scene, the opening scene. But there's a strange little foreshadowing thing that he says that he and Sven have. Henrik says something fishy is going on. Wrong genus, Henrik. It's a lizard. And that you should stay away from things like that. And Sven calls him a superstitious fool. Henrik agrees and says, but he tells Sven not to come complaining to him, which is an ironic statement considering that we never see Henrik again after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just found that an interesting choice to have this character was built up like he was going to be a regular part of the movie. In this opening, 5-6 minute scene and then gone. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they kept Sven around, I thought after a while kind of strained credibility.
I don't think so, because in them in 1954, that cop is he's just there. He's the one who finds the little girl, and then suddenly he's part of the whole thing. He's just a cop. He doesn't have to be there. He's not necessary.
But it still makes more sense for a cop to be involved than, oh, look, I'm the miner who found this thing.
They needed the hunky Teutonic guy.
Before I remembered his name, and sometimes in my notes I just refer to him as Blonde Dude.
Blonde Dude. One guy who looks like he could use a sandwich. I mean,
yes, he does.
In that beach scene, he is painfully thin. Like, dude, eat something, have some pasta. Come on.
And that which is makes the beach scenes a little interesting because he's almost as skinny as his date. I mean.
You know what? I think he's skinnier because he's taller. If he was shrunk down to her size and that same skinniness, they would match each other perfectly.
Yeah, but then we move to the campfire scene, which is almost exactly the same in both versions, where they're where everyone's just talking about what's going on. It's almost shot for shot exactly the same. It's just that the dialogue is in two different languages. However, they were trying to do the sciencey things. I think one of my notes at that point was like, see, old men talk about science.
Now, I will give, there's a nice explanation for
but
the fact that
they try to, but I'm like, I was like, I don't think you could, what did I put in there? Because I'm like, how could you still have, what is it? Oh, also, I want to point out that the American version has narration that early on, which made me think of reporter Steve Martin, which I kind of liked.
A little bit.
But I said bones can't be fossils if they're still in live skin.
Yeah, but they kept calling them fossils. However, they did give a pretty decent explanation for why the blood was fresh or appeared fresh. And they said, well, it was the heat of the drill as it penetrated the body.
Yeah. I'm willing to go along with that.
Congratulations. That actually makes a little bit of sense.
Oh, here's it says, see, old men talk about science and jigsaws, because that's when we're introduced to Dr. Dolby in the next scene at the aquarium. Because then we get the next couple scenes are almost exactly the same in both versions, because we have the campfire scene, we have Lisa driving her dad to work. And it's almost exactly the same.
And one of the most poorly filmed introductory scenes of a character ever, because you barely see her in profile. She looks upstage at her father as he's getting out of the vehicle. It's like, okay, both of you directors dropped the ball on this one. This is terrible.
Yeah.
The actress who plays Lisa is attractive, and you want to show her off because she's going to be in the rest of the movie, and you were seeing the back of her head.
Yeah.
No. This is terrible.
And then he just wanders around the aquarium. So it's like, look at this aquarium. And, it's not as bad. It's not as egregious as Gamera versus Zigra, but still.
Oh, and they have 2 green sea turtles in the smallest wall-mounted little aquarium enclosure. And I'm thinking, this would not fly in today's aquariums. I mean, half of those exhibits are like, they're just tiny little, like 3 foot by 3 foot tanks.
Yeah.
And they have pretty big animals in them. I was like,
yeah. And this is also at these points is when we're introduced to Dr. Dolby, and we also get introduced to Peterson in the US version. Nicholson, it's the same character with 2 different names.
Yeah.
In the Danish version, and my note when that happened is a Danish redneck.
I put, let's see, enter Mickelson, Dirk Passer, handyman, told to keep freezer at -20°C. Don't worry, everything runs on electricity, Dr. Darcy assures him.
Including the eels.
Including the electric.
That was actually funny. He's like, everything runs on electricity here, even the eels. I'm like, okay, that was funny.
The most unmotivated electric eel tank is in the middle of a hallway by itself. And it says electric eel in English in both versions.
Yes.
And Mickelson looks.
And we have named the eel Chekhov because that was Chekhov's eel.
It was Chekhov's eel.
Oh, look, dopey character, electric eel, open top. It's just there
When's he
by
gonna touch
not an exhibit or anything. And he's like, oh, look at that. He's like, he's going to stick his hand in there. He's gonna stick
Now,
his
there
head
is
in there like
Yeah.
an idiot, not because like someone pushes him and he falls in. No, he's gonna be an idiot and stick his hand in there. Happens in both versions.
Except in the American version, he walks by it the first time, says, "Huh, electric eel. I guess everything runs on electricity here." And he kind of does a, okay, and he walks away. Second time he comes by, he puts his hand in it and does this weird jiggy dance, blah, blah, blah.
Where he cries out for his mother.
Yeah, mother. In the Danish version, comedy comes in threes. Dirk Passer knows this, and the director knows this because he films comedies for a living. He passes by it once, says his line about electric eels. Second time, he's like looking at it. He taps on the glass again. He kind of, no, I'm not going to touch it. Not going to touch it. He walks away. Third time, he touches it, and we get the payoff, which is, again, just as stupid as you think it is. But
yeah,
and that's why I call it.
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, this is like what was his name? It's the guy who played Ernest.
Oh, not Vern.
No, that was one of the
Jim Varney.
Jim Varney. I was like, it was a V name. It's like the sort of thing you would see Jim Varney do, but Jim Varney has like that rubber face where he does all the crazy expressions. So if I saw Jim Varney playing Peterson, and he's like, "Oh look, it's an eel," like his face he's gonna mug the camera, and he's like his face is just gonna contort into shapes you didn't think were humanly possible. I think it would be more entertaining at that point.
Well, I mean, for the 60s, this was the comedy sensibilities of the 60s. He was very in line with, say, Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of a Jerry Lewis.
Yeah. Now, it should be
themselves.
noted that in the US version, this is one of the few bits of humor they left in.
Yes.
Because they cut most of the comedy out because they wanted to because AIP was like, we need to have a serious science fiction film for the audience, for the sci-fi audiences. They're smart. We need to respect them. And I'm like, did you forget what movie you had? I was just
Now, here's what makes me think that the part of Mickelson / Peterson was not meant to be a comic part at all. Because in the novel, Mickelson is competent and barely in it. He comes in, "Yes, doctor, I will do this, I will do that." And then he is the one who alerts them when the monster starts moving. And that's it. He's out. There's no other use for him.
Well, he basically disappears in the movie. He basically disappears after about the first 30-40 minutes.
I'm going to say again, he is a victim of the monster, which is why we get the derpy puppet that can't seem to do anything right. Now, I think the only reason that he is comic relief is because he was a friend of the director. He had been used by that director in a couple other films previous to this one. So I think it was kind of a, hey, you're funny. Let's put you in the movie and get some comedy in this thing. It's really dreary and monster heavy.
But then they lean into it super hard, as we'll get into, because there's an infamous, besides the flying seas, there's another infamous exclusive to the Danish version we'll need to talk about. So we have all this going on, and then we have the scene the scenes with Dolby working there at night look like they're taken out of Universal horror movies.
Yep.
With the kind of impressionistic, shadowy lighting, and there's a storm going, which is also, I think, if I remember correctly, more dramatic in the US version. There's more lightning and shadow. And
but it's very tropey.
Yeah, it's very tropey. And then he's so tired, he leaves the door open a crack, falls asleep because he didn't have enough coffee. And then the tail starts to thaw and things like that. I did my joke on there was like, did he leave the door open or did the invisible man stop by? Because it almost looked like an invisible man.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, he didn't. Well, he pushed it closed. It didn't seem to latch.
Yeah,
but it obviously looked like there's like got to be like a wire or string kind of going.
Yeah. Also, I'm starting to wonder if I at least saw part of this movie before I saw it on MST3K, because that first freezer scene is eerily similar to the first scene in my kaiju novella Destroyer, which is about not a tale, it was about it was a scientist and his beautiful daughter assistant examining a frozen T-Rex corpse. So I'm wondering if I may have seen this movie, or at least part of it at one point, and that scene was buried in my subconscious someplace.
Entirely possible.
Just throwing it out there. And then but here's the thing. When you look at how, the extreme cold keeps Reptilicus from doing anything.
Right.
And nobody thought at any other point in either version of the movie, they're not like, its weakness is extreme cold. Maybe we should use this. Nope.
I think these are not the Japanese super scientists that we're used to. Okay. Who would build a cryo machine to be able to do that, to do a quick freeze. Like was it the absolute zero cannon or something like that? These are the Danes who are still in recovery from World War II. I think it just never occurred to them. Yeah. I don't even think they think, well, it was still alive when it was frozen. So why do that again?
Yeah. Also, I will point out, as was mentioned in the entertaining info dump, the tail prop is impressive.
It is incredible.
A lot of money was thrown at that. Like
both
when I was watching this on
thawed.
MST3K, I'm like, okay, the characters are kind of stock, but I'm gelling with it. Ooh, that tail prop is pretty impressive and things like that. It's when you get about 40 minutes in and then Reptilicus shows up that I'm like, okay, I'm officially checked out. But I was willing to go with the movie up until then. And that tail prop especially is incredibly impressive. Like they're actually making this thing look like real flesh and they're cutting into it. And they're doing close-ups of it, and the close-ups of it when they're slicing some stuff out look really impressive. Yeah. Those parts are only in the American version.
I know.
And those were probably Melchior inserts because he said he put a lot of close-ups in.
I will say this, that the frozen prop has all that structure. It's sitting up very, very rigidly. Makes perfect sense. It's then frozen in the earth. It was probably lying on its side, whatever. When it's thawed, it's flattened. Like the meat has kind of let gravity take it. And I found that to be a fascinating bit of, again, actual science, even though they didn't mention that. It wasn't explicit. It's something that you just notice. And if you're like a cook or something, you don't even think about that, because that's exactly what happens to meat. Is it's rigid, and then once it thaws, gravity takes over and it kind of slumps. Yeah. And I liked seeing that slumped tail where it was flatter on the bottom and kind of pooching on the sides, and like, okay, impressive. How many cows did you slaughter for this scene? Because that doesn't look like gel form or anything like that, because they didn't have gel form back then.
Yeah.
So, impressive. You're right.
Yeah.
Quite impressive.
Yeah. And then we get to the part where Connie's introduced, and my note in there was like, oh, beautiful women can't be scientists. What do you think this is, a comic book?
Yes. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Followed soon after by Carl Ottensen as Brigadier General Mark Grayson, the angriest man on the planet. And I pointed this out. This is my big joke. He looks like one of the Thunderbirds or Go puppets. And he has all the emotional qualities of a Thunderbirds or Go puppet. I know we heard on the commentary that he's a better actor than this gives credit for. Okay. But if this is what we're going with, no, he's not. He very much resembles a puppet. Or sorry, I guess marionette is the proper term.
Yeah. And then we get a press conference scene where the regeneration incubator is mentioned. It's like, hey, slow down, Dr. Martins. It's not time for the Toku topic yet. Just trying to start it early. Not yet, sir. Not yet. We also find out that we get the title drop because the full name for the monster is Reptilicus martensius. That's what one of the journalists does that, and he says like, just Reptilicus will be fine. That is still. Well, I shouldn't say it's the unofficial name on the island, but it's what the big brain people over at Monarch Outpost 83 want to call Reptilicus, because apparently they don't want to apply Titanus. It's not Titanus Reptilicus. They're sticking with this one.
Well, this one doesn't feed on radiation, so.
Yeah.
But I've also got an interesting point, is that Dr. Martin specifically says Reptilicus will be fine, kind of distancing himself and not wanting the glory of having his name on this find. And I think it's a humility that would not be in an American movie with an American scientist. An American scientist would say, yes, my name is Martensis.
Yeah.
So yes, But so this cultural difference that no, you don't need to put my name on
Reptilicus
it.
is fine. Also,
Yeah.
I would like to point out that when we're introduced to Mr. Grayson, and because he's supposed to be American, when he introduces himself, he's speaking English and there's no subtitles, which I hate it when they do that. It's like, okay, just because they're supposed to be speaking English, you can still put subtitles. It's okay. All right. I know it's more like closed captions at that point, but no one cares. All right. And he, throughout the Danish version, will slip into little bits of English here and there. So if you were curious to at least potentially hear the sing-song Danish accents that bothered the higher-ups at AIP so much, watch the Danish version, you at least get tastes of it.
There's one other artifact, especially from watching the Danish version, is the word phrase okay seems to have become ubiquitous to all languages. You hear it in here by 1961. You hear it in here, you hear it in Japanese films, you hear it in some Chinese films. Okay is not translated. It's just because it's okay.
It is an English idiom for sure.
Definitely, it definitely belongs to us, us stupid Americans, us baka gaijin. But apparently, it has become worldwide by this point because everybody's using it now.
Yeah, basically. And just kind of going through and just looking at some of those, we get the microscope gag. The microscope gag is better in the American version because we actually see what he's looking at.
Yes.
I would say it is, but I could also see the merits in just seeing passers' reactions. Well, regardless, apparently this was inspired by a 1903 film where they did basically the same gag where the scientist, I forget the name of the movie, but it was the same thing. The scientist is eating a sandwich. He takes a bit of his cheese, puts it under his microscope, looks at it, and he's like, oh, I don't want to eat it anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I think by actually seeing it, I think it becomes a little more interesting, but I can see the merits in not just focusing more on the reaction. But I think seeing what he's seeing and seeing that it looks weird and then getting his reaction, I think makes the reaction a little more understandable.
Well, it's definitely better for the American audiences but for the Danish one, they did play that wah, 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 wah.
The soundtrack is different in between the versions, but there isn't a separate composer for the US version other than the fact that they use some stock music in the US version. So the name of the composer is Sven Gildmark with a Y, who scored over 175 movies, and then some of his music was replaced by stock tracks from Robert Stein.
Of course. Got to get those Germans in there somehow.
I mean, we had a German actress.
This is true.
In the US version.
We're mostly following the American version with my little interjections on the Danish.
I mean, I'm cutting back and forth between my notes here.
There's the unnecessary beach scenes. It's the scenes between Connie and not Connie.
Definitely not Connie.
Karen,
Danish version. It's
no. Between Karen and Sven at the beach, and it's that scene that I find it's completely unmotivated. It's just obviously to highlight that they're developing this relationship.
Yeah. Here's the problem with that whole romantic subplot is that if they had made it mean something in the rest of the movie, it would have been fine. And I would have said like, well, that's something that should have been kept. I almost wonder if AIP just looked at it as like, this really doesn't do anything. Sure, we get pretty girl in swimsuits sometimes, but this does nothing. This does nothing. It's not like in the original Godzilla, where there's a love triangle and the love triangle gets mucked with by Godzilla showing up and then plays into dealing with the Godzilla problem. Or like a Shinichi Sekizawa script where you have human characters with human problems and the human problems get solved by the kaiju.
Right.
So if it had been something like, even something as obvious and basic as Sven falls in love with Karen. Karen gets put in danger by Reptilicus. Sven has to go be brave because he's an engineer. He's a miner. He's not a soldier. He's not going to run into danger. And then he's like, I have to go save her. And
I can see them doing something.
Like when he goes to save her, he's like, baby, I realize I love you, or something like that.
I can see them doing something darker and more keeping kind of with what the novel was doing, is have the rivalry between the two sisters, have one of the sisters be in danger and get killed despite what Sven does. And that allows that like kind of frees up him in a way to determine which sister that he's more interested in. So if you actually had worked on that love triangle a little bit more and then had one of the sisters pass, you add some drama, a lot of drama if one of the sisters dies, but then that puts him in the arms of whatever sister survives. And that's a way to get around that. But I found a reason for that scene. It's tenuous, and I wish they would have had a third bit for it because it only does 2 of them. I think it's a Danish thing. This is work is fine. Being serious about your work is fine, but you should take time to enjoy your life. Karen has a super carefree attitude, mostly because she's supposed to be only 20. She's still technically,
young,
barely an adult.
Yeah.
And, Sven is very kind of upset that she is so carefree and just isn't worried about anything.
Yeah. Actually, you told me that you kind of get it in the Danish version, but you said that there was a line in the novelization where she sees Connie and she's this older, very dignified woman.
Yes.
And she's American. And she's like, oh, is that what the American women are wearing now? And then Connie just kind of like, really, child? And then,
just gives her a look and then goes back and says, now, very much I can't believe you're asking me this question. I'm here to do a job.
Yeah.
Go away, child. But that statement, that whole you should enjoy life, is also said by Dr. Dalby to the general, to Grayson, because Grayson is all focused on the problem at hand. And he tells him, look, I understand you're here for a job. That's great. Go to Tivoli Garden. Enjoy yourself.
We need a travelogue.
It was more like you need to relax, dude. Your blood pressure is way too high.
Yeah. Well, and the Barbano and Newman in the commentary argued that, I think they're kind of reading into it. They argued that Grayson is a soldier who needs a war. He's bored because he's stationed in Denmark, and he's like, that's why he's looking at newspapers. He's like, oh, General Grayson, in charge of, like, what was it, like 2 women, 2 lab techs, and one dead lizard or something like that.
He did say a soldier because he did have the captain.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes, he's bemoaning the fact that he's a soldier without a war because he's in
I'm
Denmark,
not going to agree with
peaceful, and now there's a kaiju crisis. So now he's like, he kind of comes alive. And he's like, I need this crisis, and then because then they are like, and then the monster gets defeated, and he's like, no.
Well, the interesting thing that I find, I disagree with those 2 commentators, just because Grayson is a decorated veteran of the Battle of the Bulge in World War II.
They mention that only in the U.S. version, though. It's very vague in the U.S. version. In the U.S. version, he just says, "Oh, he was a decorated World War II veteran," basically.
Yeah. But I think
when you specifically say Battle of the Bulge, you're like, that means something.
That means a huge thing because that was a major battle. That was a major push. And I think that this seems to him to be like a slight. He was sent here by the UN specifically in case something happened. Now he sees it as a slight. I'm babysitting a frozen lizard. I can see their mindset though. It's like, this dude did a lot of jet during the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes.
I'll censor myself.
Thank you. I get it. I think what he's saying is like, yes, he appreciates being the dump button around here. Although his name being used as a euphemism, I think has gotten a little strange.
It is a little strange.
You're really quiet today, Jet. Oh, I think he said he's learning something.
Well, good. We're trying to be educational.
Yeah, he's trying to be educational here. He's always trying to download data to understand us weirdo humans.
I think that he's misinterpreting why he's there. His bosses saw the potential danger, said, "This thing's regenerating. What if it gets loose? We need to send our best boy there." And he that didn't translate well to him, and so he's like, they put me in the ass end of nowhere, babysitting a frozen lizard. Great. And so, the angry army guy is a trope in everywhere. And he never really changed. He smiles a couple of times, kind of painfully.
Yeah. Well, and then we toward the end, we do get one of the kind of a classic, it's a trope and also a classic conflict. again, mentioned in the entertaining info dump,
Yeah.
and where it's military versus science.
Yes.
Because Gracie even says, like, I only know one way to kill. And then Dr. Martin says, like, you need to learn another one, basically. And it's shot very interestingly, because you see when it shows them, they're on opposite sides of a table, on opposite sides of the frame, illustrating that they are completely opposite of each other with different approaches. He's trying to take the military approach, and the purely military approach, it's very Japanese in that regard, is not working. And then they keep refusing. They refuse. So this is probably they keep refusing to listen to the scientists, and things, the situation starts getting worse. That's probably the closest thing that the movie has to actual hubris. It's not, I want to argue, I don't know if it's hubris or just plain stupidity, where they're just refusing to listen.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, but again, it's still them responding to an accident. It's not their fault that the monster was unleashed. And who knows if they had listened, if they could have even solved the problem sooner. It was more like they just make the situation worse by not listening.
But I do like, in that little argument that they have, is Grayson will move forward in the attack mode, saying, this is all I know. Bombs are all I know. It's the only way. The scientist Martins moves up, says, but they will be blown into, thousands of pieces. Then we will pick up all the pieces. They keep moving closer as they're arguing. He says, you've got to think of a different way. Well, what way is that, Doctor? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that was the most telling thing. It's really, that scene is really well written and well performed, actually, for a couple of fairly wooden guys. But when Martin says, I don't know, when have we seen that?
Yeah.
When a scientist is completely without an idea.
Yeah, because they don't. He also had a spontaneous heart attack that they did just for.
True.
That was one of the bits where Jet's battery got charged up a little bit, because they bring it back later just so they can have an excuse to come up with the solution to kill the monster. But just like, because when I was watching it, I was like, why spontaneous heart attack? Why? Oh, okay. Still flimsy, but okay.
It was very tropey, but. And a little heavy-handed, but still, we took father. Father's fine. How come you're not with Dad? Oh, he's fine. They gave him a sedative.
Oh, that's what we do. And then it turns into Beast in 20,000 Fathoms, where it's like, shoot the bazooka into it. Which, when we get to the ending, I have questions about the ending. But anyway, so we're then we get to, it's moving, but it's not really alive. And, then it gets loose and it starts running around. My note at that point was that you're going to need a bigger tank.
Yeah, indeed.
To be continued tomorrow on MIFV, wherever you get your podcasts.